Hello, my name is Michael Ramage. I am the Director of the Center for Computer and Information Technology at Murray State University, and welcome to IT Matters. IT Matters is hosted each year through a partnership between Murray State University and CFSB. And this year is I believe it is our fourth IT Matters conference. It may be fifth. We typically have these in person, but obviously the times are what they are, and we're excited to be able to stream this to you this year. I want to share a couple things before we get started. First of all, I want to say thanks again to our co-host CFSB, and I'll let Taylor with CFSB share in just a few comments in just a second. Also want to say a special thank you to AT&T. AT&T is our sponsor for IT Matters. They have been with us since we started, and we certainly appreciate their support of IT Matters, and especially because all of their sponsorship goes to providing scholarships for students in our programs, our academic programs, and we're really excited about that. This year we are streaming on multiple platforms, so you're either watching us on a Facebook page or you're watching us on YouTube. Either way, I would encourage you to share in the chat, make comments, things that you like, questions that you might have. And as we go through today, we will be able to see those comments, see the questions that you have, and we'll be able to respond both in the chat, but also be able to ask those questions of our speakers. I know it's a little different. You can't raise your hand and ask a question like you would in a in-person conference, but we want to make sure that you have that opportunity today as well. So with that, let me turn it over to Taylor and share a few comments from your perspective.
Thank you, Michael. I'm Taylor Hicks. I'm the Information Security Officer at Community Financial Services Bank. Like Michael said, I think this is our fourth year doing the IT Matters side of things, and we've been partnering with Murray State for several years before that, doing Security Matters with them in the spring. We'd love to see you guys there as well. It is definitely our honor to work with Murray State to put this on every year. We really enjoy this. I love being a part of this and seeing everybody that comes through and speaks. We always have a great host of speakers. This year is no different. I'm really excited about everyone we've got coming in today. Looking forward to hearing what they have to say, and I'm just really thankful to be here. I'm looking forward to getting back in person, hopefully next year. I was really hoping this year would make it, but hopefully spring and fall both for Security Matters and IT Matters. We'll be seeing you guys in person, and we're really looking forward to that. I'll turn it back over to you, Michael.
All right. Well, today, as you have seen likely on a number of social media channels, we have a great lineup of speakers today. And you saw it on the screen a little bit earlier. And I want to walk through those four speakers that we have today, because there's a couple of themes that I think are really important for us to think about. Our first speaker, and I'll introduce him in a bit of a more formal manner in just a minute, is Drew Perry with Valvoline. Drew's a familiar face to all of us, and we're excited to have him. And we wanted him to come in, and the title of his presentation is The Changing Technology Landscape and the Worker Bee and the Hive. And what COVID has done a lot of really challenging things for folks. And it's been horrible. It's, people have gotten sick. There's a lot of really bad things, but one of the positive things that have come out of COVID is the idea of remote work, and we're all over the place now. And along with that comes security concerns and technology challenges and personnel challenges and HR challenges and data privacy concerns. And we wanted to have Drew talk a little bit about that, because they have those same challenges within their organization. Our second speaker is Mark Mccumber. He is with Volta, which is a managed service provider. And I'll talk a little bit more about Mark as well. But if you have followed the news over the last year, you know that the landscape of a managed service provider has changed quite a bit. And we wanted to hear from an MSP of how that landscape has changed and what their perspective is. So those two they're both security speakers, but this isn't a security only topic. This is the IT landscape has changed. and we want to see what that looks like for our communities and for our partners and experts that are on the phone or on the conference. I say on the phone. And then we're going to shift gears a little bit and hear from Dr. James Stapleton. He is the co-founder of Codify, and Codify has been working with a company in Paducah, and I'll talk more about this as well, that is really trying to grow tech jobs and innovation in West Kentucky. There's some really cool things that are going on, and it's all part of that changing landscape. And Dr. Stapleton's going to share a little bit about what that new landscapes looks like from his perspective and what it looks like in rural areas like we're in. And then our final speaker is John Waltz. John is a really interesting guy. He's from Kentucky, from Paducah, moved out to San Francisco after college, is in the blockchain space. He's been in crypto. He's been in a number of different areas that all deal with blockchain. Blockchain is a word that so many of us are hearing right now. It's a buzzword that in many ways that people like to say, but they don't necessarily know what it means. And so a couple of things that are happening, we wanted John to come in, share with us what's going on, first of all, and then be able to talk about what that means for Kentucky and in West Kentucky in particular, because there's some really cool opportunities beyond just the idea of doing crypto mining, which so many people are doing right now. So we want to hear from John and wrap the day up with that. The format for each speaker is that they'll have a presentation and there'll be a time at the end for questions and answers. Now, I know we have several folks on the different platforms already watching on the different pages. If you have a question for example, as Drew, our first speaker, presents, go ahead and put it in the chat. If there's an opportunity for me to interrupt Drew and ask the question for you, I'll do it. If not, I'll have the list of questions that I can go back to at the very end of his presentation, but I will make sure you get it. And I'll just say that I know there's a lot of people commenting in the chats because I can see it streaming in, and I appreciate that, and I want you to do that, but make sure you put in the questions or the comments that you have that you would want me to share with the speaker. So with that, let me give Drew a little bit better of an introduction than what I previously did. Drew is somebody at Security Matters back in the spring. We joked about Wes Spencer speaking, and the only person that is close to Wes and the number of times they've presented at Security Matters and IT Matters is Drew. And it's for a couple of reasons. First of all, because we know Drew, we love Drew, but it's because Drew is truly an expert. He's knowledgeable. He knows what he's talking about when it comes to cybersecurity, and he's a great presenter and is easy to understand and follow along with. We get more positive feedback from Drew than just about anything that we do, whether it is through IT Matters, whether it's through Security Matters, whether it's guest speaking in a classroom. Drew is a graduate of Murray State of our TSM, what our CNM program used to be. He recently won our leadership award. And if you want to see a little bit more about Drew, you can watch that video that is on our YouTube channel. But Drew worked for Murray State, was a student at Murray State, left Murray State to go to Ashland, now Valvoline, has quickly become a leader at Valvoline. He is a leader in this field. And when we started talking about this topic, this remote worker aspect, we actually discussed, and I think I shared this with you, Drew, having a panel, having an HR person and having a security person and having a technology person and looking at the different perspectives. And then what we decided was that Drew had enough personalities that he could cover all of those areas in one presentation. So when Drew said that he was willing to share, we're like, well, we don't need to have the panel now. We have Drew. And that is a little tongue in cheek, but it's also because of how highly we actually think about you and what you do and bring to our presentations. So with that, Drew, I'll let you go ahead and share your screen and get started. And I appreciate you very much for your willingness to share with us today. And the only thing I regret is that you're not able to do that with us in person today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michael. I definitely appreciate it. I think my screen should be visible now, so we'll go ahead and get started.
There it goes.
All right, good
perfect.
Deal. So absolutely, I'm definitely honored to be asked to share again with this group. There are so many people online and in the chat that I have so many years of history with, personally, professionally, through education, and it's always an honor to be able to come back and talk with this group. So today I'm going to talk to you about what I consider the changing technology landscape of the Hive and the worker bee. And when Michael and I were first talking about this topic, we were focusing around the IT worker, the technology worker. And the thing that I quickly centered on is, for the last 18 months of, all the troubles that we've been having, and the technological impact has not been just to IT or technology workers. It's been to all knowledge workers. And in fact, it's been to all workers. There's no one on the planet whose work is 100% the same way it was 18 months ago. Some of us have been impacted significantly more than others, but everyone has seen some type of operational impact in their career. And so what I'm going to focus around now is typically knowledge workers. So those are not just in IT, but this is finance, accounting, business, attorneys, doctors, lawyers. That's attorneys, but you get what I'm saying. And we're gonna go from there. But very quickly, I'd like to hit on my favorite slide of all my presentations, which is who is this schmuck? Because as I like to tell everybody, I appreciate these conversations that we get to have. I learn more about the topics from presenting with people and having conversations with people and getting the feedback than I do before I come. So I really appreciate that. I'm the head of information security at Valvoline. I came to Valvoline after leaving West Kentucky in 2013 with my wife and family. And then just a few years ago, we unintentionally grew that family. So now instead of having a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old, I have a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old and a 2-year-old, which has been great during a pandemic, I can tell you that. But she definitely brings a lot of joy and keeps me young. That's what people tell you to say. I don't believe it. She makes me feel old, but we definitely love having her. So I came to Valvoline in 2013, and at that time, Valvoline was owned by Ashland Chemical Company, which still operates a plant in Calvert City. But 5 years ago, the two companies, Ashland and Valvoline, split. They separated and went into two separate publicly traded companies, and I stayed with the Valvoline side, which operates out of the Lexington, Kentucky headquarters. We have a beautiful HQ building that looks like a sand crawler. It looks like a silver sand crawler from Star Wars. We definitely love the building, and I will really enjoy when I'm able to be back in the building, because for the last 18 months, I've been working from home. So for those of you who don't know, I'm going to give a real brief overview of Valvoline. I'm sure most of the people on the call have heard of Valvoline. We are, as I'm told to say, a leading provider of automotive services and premium branded lubricants worldwide. We have sales in more than 150 countries, 55,000 retail locations, and 15,000 installer customers. We also operate more than 1,500 quick lube operations in North America, making us the #2 quick lube franchise, quick lube provider in the United States. And in Canada, under the Great Canadian Oil Change brand, we're the #3 operator. So we formulate engine lubricants. We sell them in third-party stores. We provide our products to installer channels to do their own automotive services, and we operate 1,500 instant oil change services of our own. So we have we're in a lot of different spaces. We're in chemical, we're in formulation, we're in energy, we're in automotive, we're in service and retail. So there's definitely a lot there. And with that comes the size and scope of the organization. So as a global organization operating worldwide, we have 3,000 full-time corporate employees that are all direct employees of the organization, operating from the United States to Mexico to China to Australia to Europe to Russia to all around the planet. And we also have between 15 and 20,000, 25 and 30,000, my math was wrong, between 25 and 30,000 employees in our instant oil change retail centers in North America. So the Valvoline Instant Oil Change, if you're taking your car in to get a quick 20-minute oil change, those folks are our either corporate or franchise employees that all operate through our point of sale system that we develop internally, that my team is responsible for the security for. So that's that's setting the footprint of how my organization would be impacted by a global dynamic change in the labor market and the workforce. So we've seen impacts both to our retail markets in those 25,000 employees, as well as the 3,000 global corporate employees. So what I want to do right now with this slide is what I call set the stage. So this is my favorite part, where I set the bar very, very low, and hopefully I can jump over it. Throughout the next 25 minutes or so, I'm going to ask some questions and I'm going to poke some holes, but I'm not going to give you a basket of solutions. I'm not going to say, in order to have this secure outcome or this operational outcome, this is what you need to do. That's the luxury of being the security guy. I get to tell everyone why their plans are broken. You need to hire an engineer to fix it, which is it's kind of tongue in cheek, because obviously my team and my organization plays a key part in designing more secure solutions and architecting the plans for the future. But definitely I'm the guy to say, here are the challenges, and we'll work with you to identify solutions. I also won't stick to the time. Anybody who knows me and knows my family knows that it's a genetic issue, and I apologize. This could take another 15 minutes, or it could take another 75 minutes. It's just part of the Perry nature. We are long-winded, short-winded, and everywhere in between. So we'll see what we can do. So let's start looking at the, and by the way, I'm going to bleed this metaphor for the first 5 or 6 slides as hard as I can, and then I promise I'll move on. But looking at how the worker bee and the Hive integrated up until about 18 months ago. So starting with when we work, right? The linear workday, as we see it now, the 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 or 9 to 6, whatever it is for you, it's some kind of, typically for knowledge workers, it's some kind of linear workday. It was established before the invention of electricity, when workers needed actual daylight to work. And the 9 to 5 schedule was formalized in the 1920s for manufacturers. So now that we have electricity and many of us prefer to work outside the hours of natural daylight, why do we still persist in this linear 8-hour daily work? But up until 18 months ago, primarily that's what we did. So then where we work, right? Traditionally, the office or the factory or the hospital or the school has also been viewed as the headquarters of work. Even when we're talking about the term remote working, right? Talking about remote working suggests employees are away from the site where work gets done. So they're not working where the work is, they're working remotely, just by the name. And the pandemic proved to us that many employees can get work done offsite and outside of the office. And especially in the case of my organization, significantly better. We had 2 in a row record years in the middle of the largest global pandemic that my generation certainly has ever seen. So if we're able to be successful in this new environment, why is daily physical co-location still the norm? And then, excuse me, how do we work? Right? Many leaders still today, and I will full disclosure, I will say that while I'm presenting this mindset, this information, I am this slide. I enjoy being at the office. I enjoy 9 to 5. I enjoy meetings. That's the way my brain has always been wired to work. Fortunately, newer members of my team are helping me to kind of unlearn, unthink, and unwind the preconceived notions. But just to let everybody know, I'm not poo-pooing all this, because I am a full ascriber to this. But in a lot of leaders, like I said, myself included, think that working together at the same time is key to innovation, right? This mindset arose in the 1950s, when the best way to get work done was to gather everybody in a conference room and just hash everything out. We'd spitball, we'd brainstorm, we'd have either a whiteboard or a chalkboard to put ideas up. But now that we have all these asynchronous collaboration tools, why do we need to maintain a culture of synchronous meetings? And these are great questions to ask. But up until 18 months ago, this was how the primary workforce operated. And then obviously this slide. Now, I'll say that over the last 18 months, I have been part of panels, part of conversations, part of presentations that have had news clippings and headlines, et cetera, that told everybody everything you already know, right? So I just call this my insert doom and gloom slide here. 18 months ago, winter of 2019, 2020, the novel coronavirus was making its way across the planet. And by spring of 2020, majority of US businesses were either closed or using some kind of adapted work model, either remote or hybrid, et cetera. But then fast forward a little bit, we've done all the evils, right? And so that's not what I'm here to talk about. We've gone through all that. But by spring of 2021, vaccine availability in the US was on the rise, and businesses wanted to return to normal, mine included, right? But their employees not so much. And so the only headline I'm going to leave you with is this one. This is my absolute favorite headline of all of the coronavirus. Is From June 1st of this year, Bloomberg had this article that said employees are quitting their jobs instead of giving up working from home. People would rather not work for a company that they've worked for significant 5, 10, 15 years than go back to the office. And they said, we've spent a year working remotely. We don't want to come back in. And for a lot of folks, that's been extraordinarily successful. So I want to run through, in the next few minutes, talking about how our attitudes have been shifted as employees by part of this, by the coronavirus. So, this is what we were, right? Once upon a time, we were office workers in an in-person environment with an office-centric design, right? You had a conference room, you typically had a desk. Whether or not you had an office, there was a U space. Maybe you had an organization that hot desked, whatever. But you matriculated at an office and you worked from 9 to 5, and then you went home if you're lucky, or if it was crunch time, you stayed many, many hours. I've done that before. There was a reason my office at Murray State had a cot in it. So I definitely thank Brian Purcell and Tommy Phillips for that, because we went overnight plenty of nights. But this is the way that up until, again, a year and a half ago, businesses had worked for literally 100 years. And then the pandemic hit, right? And the pandemic hit, and we took our office-centric design and turned it into a remote environment. Now, for those of you that were impacted in the same way I was, we were literally told to pick up our things and take them home and work remotely. And we were expected to work in the same schedule, in the same capacity, in the same timelines as we had been working, but just at home. Now we had laptops that allowed for remote technology. We had VPN connectivity so we could get connected, but I didn't have a telephone on my desk at home, right? I had a soft phone on my computer, but it didn't really work the same way. Also, I didn't have a conference room. Yeah, we had Zoom and we have Teams, but this was not the way that I had architected before. And so we maintained this office-centric design in a remote environment, which is, instead of a square peg in a square hole, is a square peg in a triangular hole. And we made it work. All the research that's shown over the past year is that companies made it work. We successfully moved forward while output has been impacted, and businesses are seeing significant losses as a result. Because costs were heavy, we still did what we could. We shuffled through it and made it work. Pardon me. But now, since the vaccines have been distributed, we're in a situation where, what's next, right? We don't have to continue on with this office-centric design in a remote environment, but one or the other can change. Both of them can change, et cetera. So what's the plan? How would we do this? An interesting survey recently through Gartner Research said that 75% of hybrid or remote employees say their expectations for working flexibly have increased. And only 4% of them have said they prefer an on-site arrangement. I have 24 employees that report to my direct reports or their direct reports in our team. And when we began to open up our offices in July, I surveyed my team because it was optional. You didn't have to come back if you want to. It was only for vaccinated employees. There were a lot of rules to follow. But I said, listen, let's just set the stage ahead of now. Of all of you, who would be interested in actually coming back to the office and working again in the office? We spent a year and a half now working remotely and done a great job of it. How many of you, raise your hand, want to actually come back? And of the 24 employees, 21 of them said they wanted to stay permanently at home and would give up their desk space at work and give up their set, this is my area, to say I'm permanently assigned to work remotely. It was myself, and I have 4 direct reports that are managers of other teams. And only 2 of those managers had any intention to come back to the office. So there were 3 of us that were going to come back. And as of right now, none of us are in the office because we tried it for a couple of months. It wasn't terribly successful. We found out we were better at home. So we've stayed at home. So obviously, what we've done before isn't going to work. People want to stay home. They've said they want to stay home. They don't want this square peg in the square hole. But we know that the square peg in the triangle hole didn't work. So what's the next step, right? You have to identify as an organization what you're creating. If you're going to offer a hybrid environment, and I'll tell you, organizations that want to be successful from this point moving forward will have to identify for their knowledge workers a hybrid environment. You just really will. The looking from the hybrid environment, research has said that return to an industrial area work design could lose up to 39% of workers. There are 39% of workers who've said, we will just quit this type of work in general. Not that we aren't willing to come back. That's a whole different number. We will be done. We don't want to do any of this. We'll go do something else. So obviously, the right side, creating a new model designed for hybrid reality and the digital era of success is absolutely what has to occur. And so talking about what does redesigning work for the hybrid world mean? There was a thought historically that an on-site model was for an on-site world, right? The office was what got things done. The office was the machine. Working in the machine, similar to factory work, right? Moving forward from the factories of the 50s to the offices of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it was the office that the gears turned and work got done. When in reality, that's not the case because it's a human-centric world, especially for knowledge workers, right? So the office can play a successful part, and your organization and my organization will still utilize an office environment. But understanding that it's not about the office, that it's about the people, and making sure that your teams and your businesses are designed around that hybrid world and human-centric nature. So this is what the new normal. This is what the new normal looks like. Sorry, that's hard to say. And there are 4 primary models of work moving forward. They're based on distributed versus co-located, and synchronous versus asynchronous. And some of them are going to be easy, and some of them are going to be significantly challenging. So at the top left, we've got a co-located synchronous work, or what we call working together. And that's, for the most part, what we knew up until the spring of 2020, right? That was how most offices, unless you were a business that was already remote, but how the majority of American labor force in the knowledge space worked. You worked together. 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, we're here in a conference room, hashing things out, and we'll get it done. And there will still be great opportunities for working together in the new world, right? There will be, the potential for needing small scale office spaces so that collaboratively teams can get together regularly. Or there may be teams, sub-teams that do need to work together for whatever reason, for their knowledge share, for the type of work, but while the rest of the organization doesn't necessarily have to follow the model. And then looking at co-located asynchronous work, you've got working alone together, right? So working alone together means you might have a desk space that somebody wants to use 9 to 5. You might have a desk space that somebody wants to work midnight to 9 a.m. These are not necessarily shift work jobs, but what we've identified is that for the majority of work most people do, if you're in accounting and you're working on, I don't know, numbers, you guys in accounting are amazing, right? But if you're in programming, programmers especially, the software developers work 24/7, 365 anyway. So they're already asynchronous. They're in their own world. But there are significant industries in which the synchronous 9 to 5 daylight hours doesn't work and doesn't need to. And so we can provide co-located spaces that are hot desk shift spaces. We also can look at distributed synchronous work, which is pretty much what most people have today. That's what we have today at my organization as part of the pandemic, is that we've got teams, everybody's got Office 365. We join meetings, we work together on a meeting. And I will tell you, it's death by 1,000 meetings, because the sheer quantity of meetings that I attend now is literally triple or quadruple what it was just this time 2 years ago. Because you don't have those hallway conversations like Hallway Con, or the water fountain conversations, or talk in the lunchroom. There's no quick 5 minutes, so everything has to be a formal pull together. And I think a lot of you have probably seen that pain. And feel free to call me out if your work style or if your organization has been able to successfully combat that, because I will gladly pay for the answer. Because today my organization is not. But this distributed synchronous work is what we see. And then working alone apart, and we'll move on, asynchronous work, right? That's where I'm working at home and I've got a deadline. It's in 3 weeks of a project that I'm getting done, but I have resources available for whenever I want to work. And this is great for young families, old families, non-families, people that want to, individuals who have other activities they want to engage in that are during the workday. There are so many individuals that can take advantage of asynchronous distributed work that a lot of organizations already take advantage of, but we really need to start looking to. So looking over to the technology side, right? So that's the people side. What do we do with the IT? Well, obviously, hybrid work requires new technologies. And I'm not going to hit on all of those here today, because I'll say in the last 2 years, my team, as well as our IT operations team, my head just continually spins around the new adaptation of technologies that we've seen as part of this. But I'm going to focus on 3 areas to kind of wrap up this conversation about hybrid work. We're going to say these are the assumptions. So whether or not I'm right or wrong, I don't really care. I'm talking, so you guys have to agree. Just assume these are the assumptions that are given. Number 1, workers no longer connect from a single dedicated location. That's fair. Number 2, all computing activities need to be designed to support anywhere, anytime. That's assumption number 2. And assumption number 3 is collaboration is key to successful remote work. The old ways just won't cut it. So those are the 3 major assumptions that we're going to use. And there are plenty of others, like I said, but this is for the remainder of our time here. This is what we're talking about. So let's ask questions based on workers no longer connect from a single dedicated location. All right. Well, if your workforce that you're an IT administrator for isn't at their computer desks or at their laptops at their office space from Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, how does that impact you? How do you provide a safe, secure connection to sensitive corporate resources? Question number 1. How do you provide timely OS and application updates? Because we all know the Patch Tuesdays of the world did not actually slow down the spate and rate of security updates. We've just seen our applications grow and grow with the volume of updates that exist. And 3, how do you monitor appropriate usage and prevent malicious web attacks, right? So historically, once upon a time in my organization, for the first question about a safe, secure connection, we talked about VPN, right? Everybody has a VPN client. We use the Cisco AnyConnect client, like 90% of the rest of it out there, to connect remotely to a VPN environment. And then my computer thinks it's on the corporate network with everybody else's computers, and it's just like it was, right? And that works for 10, 15, 20% of your population. But that type of technology is not designed for an entire workforce to work remotely. The SSL tunnels that support VPN are an archaic technology, even though we've seen significant advancements. But we're moving more towards the fact that often, and not always, but often VPNs are action-oriented. It requires a user to connect to your virtual private network, right? So if I fire up my laptop and I'm at a Starbucks or even my house, and I just start surfing the internet, well, until I connect to the VPN, that traffic is just running wild over the internet, right? My email traffic, if you allow that, if it's not secured, web traffic, etc. Until you manually make the decision to connect to the VPN, this is where you are. So one of the things we look at is zero trust network access through products like Netscope that can provide private access. There are plenty of others that have their own private access or traffic steering to say, hey, you know what? This thing runs all the time. If you're online and you're on the internet, well, then your Facebook traffic can sure go straight out the internet to go to Facebook, but your HR traffic or your access into our collaborative work environment, it's steered down this private secure tunnel. These are all the time built, and they're role-based, so that if you're part of the finance department, you can access remotely the network share for the finance department, or the part of your collaborative environment that enables you to file forms in dollars and whatever else they do in finance. It's crazy, but they pay my check, so I'm happy for it. But compare that against like office and building services that needs to regularly remotely connect to HVAC, right? They need to be able to connect to the environmental controls or security cameras, et cetera, but they don't need it part of the finance side. So in order to meet the principles of least privilege, so we can secure our users against abuse and misuse, that type of role-based access can give significant improvements of, it's on all the time, but you can only get to what you're supposed to only get to. But there's a significant investment required in time to build that. Also, how do you provide timely OS and application updates? Most of our patch systems, WSUS, SCCM, BladeLogic, BigFix, whatever you use to deliver, historically was probably expecting machines to be internal to your network. Doesn't mean they always are, and doesn't mean they can't be designed to hit a remote population. But making sure that as you design new hybrid networks, that you are able to have conversations with those machines, update those machines, query them for security patches, et cetera, is key to delivering safety and security. How do you monitor appropriate usage and prevent malicious web attacks, right? When we were all in the office, we ran through a proxy. We use Blue Coat proxies at Valvoline. And one of the very first things we had to realize is, hey, when everybody leaves the office and they're at home, all of their traffic is unprotected. None of our rules apply, none of our security alerts, none of our incident response detections apply. And so we very quickly deployed a web proxy to give us security alerts and intelligence around the traffic that they were hitting wherever they were. And honestly, that's been one of the greatest payoffs that we've had from all the changes we've made, because it's something we should have had before. But that's an investment and requires expense and administration. And so making that decision now protects every remote employee, whether or not they're remote because of a pandemic or they're remote because they went on a work trip, right? So let's move into the second question. All computing activities need to be designed to support anywhere, anytime, right? So if you need to be able to connect from Starbucks or Disney World on Sunday morning at 3 a.m. or Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m., how do you protect these endpoints from malware such as ransomware and other attacks? So traditionally, you'd have Symantec or a McAfee antivirus, and there would be a malicious content detected. It would be cleaned. If it wouldn't be cleaned, maybe an alert goes back to your central monitoring system and it has to be addressed, right? Well, security teams for a lot of mid-sized organizations work the same schedules that the rest of the organization works. So if you've got folks that are working anytime, anywhere, that may not align. Those alerts that come in may not be addressed by an individual. So next generation endpoint detection response like Carbon Black or CrowdStrike often have built-in mechanisms to have after-hour intelligence, that if an alert comes in and it's after hours, what do you want to do with it versus what we do with it during an hours? Or you've got folks like CrowdStrike provide, they can augment and have a security operations center working with and for your team to be able to disposition some of that after hours work. But understanding that your teams will have to be able to detect and respond to, if not live, but through a technological resource, all those folks working remotely and working around the clock. So then how do you monitor these remote systems for vulnerabilities and misconfigurations? One of my favorite things, we used to be a Qualys shop. So Qualys is a vulnerability management, it's a vulnerability detection program, but it's, I'd say, vulnerability management suite to be able to scan all your servers and your workstations and say, this one doesn't have this patch applied, or this one is vulnerable to the SSL Poodle vulnerability and you need to make this configuration change, or this one, et cetera. Here are the vulnerabilities your systems have. But those were designed to run scans at specific times when your computers were on and in an office. Now that you're remotely and working different hours, those scheduled scans don't work. So all the major providers and many of the smaller groups have moved to agent-based, right? So I've got we are deploying Rapid7 right now at Valvoline. So we install an agent on your machine and it's just scanning all the time. It's just running all the time. It doesn't have to be like on and connected at 11 a.m. on Wednesday. It's if your machine is on and it's working, it has the information it needs to provide us a listed report of these are the vulnerabilities on the machine, these are the misconfigurations on the machine, and they'll report those back to us at any time. And then we regularly do our reporting internally to say, okay, for the month, on the second Tuesday or whatever, here's what we saw and here's how we can take action or remediate. And then how do you respond to security alerts from workers connecting at all hours and all geographies? And that's where I mentioned the disposition services or managed service providers that can provide some or part or all of your incident detection response. And that's key to making sure that you've got all the hours covered. And then finally, collaboration is key to successful remote work. The old ways just won't cut it. This is something that I live and die by. Once upon a time, we had network file shares and we would email copies of files back and forth to each other and we'd look at this version or that version. You'd have to put your initials on it and date it and who's got the newest one and I don't know and whatever. Well, now with Google Suites and with Office 365 and all the host of collaborative software that exists, that you can have a central document that you share with a group and provide notes and comment and feedback. So we always know what the newest version is and we have revision history on it without having to send siloed versions out. Great, that's wonderful. And that means we can collaborate on it anytime, anywhere, and get an up-to-date status of it wherever we are. But what does that mean for giving access out to that document? It might be a controlled copy versus an uncontrolled copy you emailed somewhere, but have you assigned the right permissions? Did you send it to Dave Wilson instead of Dave Williams? Are you monitoring the access that you're providing to your internal crown jewels? And are you taking action against them? And for that matter, crown jewels is the term we use for sensitive intellectual property that's key to your organization. It's different for every organization, but I'll say this. Our favorite phrase in security is if you don't measure it, you can't take action against it. If you can't see it, you can't do anything about it, right? If you as an organization haven't identified what your crown jewels are, you can't do anything to protect them. So it's key initially to identify what you have and where you have it. And also encrypt your laptops, end of story, right? Just assume that every laptop you have has important stuff on it or it wouldn't be in somebody's hands to work on. And with BitLocker from Microsoft or other host-based services from Lenovo and HP and others, there's no reason anymore not to encrypt the hard drive of all your laptops that go out in the field. At Valvoline, we do that. And I'll say this, we don't tie it to your logon credentials. A lot of organizations do because it's one step, right? But in order to improve security, we broke that up. So we have a minimum 6-digit PIN that encrypts your drive, and you have to use that PIN to even then start up the machine. And then you have a separate set of Windows login credentials that expire every 90 days that you have to use to log onto your device. And initial adoption was tough, but honestly, a year and a half later, we've had no challenges to it, and everybody's just used to it. And honestly, I probably couldn't even tell you what my PIN is anymore because it's just muscle memory when I log it in. So I'm going to move on really quickly to beyond collaboration, beyond the 3 assumptions that we have to kind of wrap up and talk about to be continued, right? So this is the last thing I want to talk about. This is the last slide I've got, and I'm right at 30 minutes. So I'm really proud of myself. These changes that employees have seen from the work model of the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and earlier and later to now, right, is step one. It's where we sit today, and the shift that we have to make as employers, as managers, as customers, as consumers, as teammates, is the shift we have for today. The change in technology, the change in security is something we have to meet the needs of right now. That's not to say that in 18 months we won't have another type, not just another pandemic, but what about another type of impact where half the country is without power, or we lose communications to significant regions in the world? There are always going to be changes and shifts that need to occur. And while the American labor force and the global labor force have been definitely remiss for decades to adapt and change, now that we've been forced to, the thing is to not let your foot off the gas, right? Understand that change is inevitable. Understand that we will have challenges that we have to move through, and be ready for them. Be ready so that day one of coronavirus, when everybody's packing up and going home, you're not going, holy cow, what do we do when they get there? You've already got plans in place. You've already got operations in place, and you're looking down the pipe at different types of changes. What is the next generation of worker? How do they want to work? Do they just want to do everything on an iPhone? So do they not need a computer? Is there a mechanism or a way to do that? Technology will shift. Maybe everybody's using Facebook VR goggles. I've got one of them. It makes me vomit. It's a lot of fun. So I don't really see everybody using those in the next few years, but I know Facebook wants us to. So all the challenges that are coming up to our labor force, just be ready for them and be ready to accept that there will be changes. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Michael for questions. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. As I shared with you before we got started, you definitely gave me a lot to think about. I asked the question in the chat, what questions do you have? So while I wait for you all to ask those questions, let me ask, you talked a little bit about this, but I know you and I have had this conversation about some of the data privacy requirements, particularly with what has come down in Europe and starting to roll across the country and in other areas. How do you address that aspect? Because you said just assume there's data on the laptop. So now you've got data, that remote worker, maybe they went to Mexico for the week, and now that data has just crossed the international boundary without you really knowing. How do you manage all of that part?
Well, one of the things that's really valuable in my organization is leading information security, and then worked with Valvoline's law department beginning 4 years ago to begin conversations. And that was because, the European General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, was coming into effect, and we had to make some changes for Europe. But we knew that Europe wasn't the only changes. And plus, we've had data privacy rules in place for different countries for years. GDPR was just the most painful and most formal. And it was the first time folks really set up and took notice and said, okay, I've got to do something. And, the United States will probably never, or if they do, it will be so late that it's effectively never, have a formal data privacy regulation in place. And so it's up to the states, right? California at first deployed the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, that has recently been updated to CCRA. Colorado has new rules. New Jersey and New York have rules. So many states, we track, I think right now I'm tracking 17 states and the changes that they have in play to data privacy. So we have internal and external privacy counsel, because I am definitely not a lawyer, as my general counsel likes to remind me all the time when I try to sound smart, that's not me for sure. And I can take their guidance, I can take their input and apply it to our technical controls. But it's key, and definitely not trying to Yes, there are needles and yes, there are haystacks, but don't try to solve all the problems at once, right? If you have 7 states that you're looking at with privacy laws, but you only do business in 3 of them, well, right now let's worry about those 3 and make sure that we're covered there. Make sure that data mapping is in place. So we had a huge effort 4 years ago that a lot of value goes out to Victoria Reynolds, who works on my team. She manages ITGRC, as well as dozens of other people throughout the company that went through the organization and said, what's our workflows for? And with an organization of our size, that was a lot. And I'm not going to say we got them all, but we continue to work through this process of saying that a vendor needs information or collects information to the consumer, then it goes here, then it goes there, then it goes there. Those data mapping exercises for every input and output of consumer data that you have or employee data that you have are key, so that as changes occur with laws or as requests come in from employees, I'll tell you, folks in California love to send you right to be forgotten requests. They love to say, I went and got my oil changed yesterday, and now I'd like you to forget my information. And I'm probably going to go back in 3 months and get my oil changed again, but as soon as I do that, I would also like for you to forget my information. And that's, I understand. It's different than our business model, because the value that we have is we track your vehicle's history, but it's your right in the state of California. So if you want to do that, great. If you call from Ohio, I'm going to do nothing, because that's the law in place. Now, we do have a minimal action, because I believe that, people's data is their own data, regardless of what the law says. And so if there are requests that we have that aren't backed up by a law, but they make sense, and they're in the spirit and principle of your own data privacy, we honor them almost universally. As long as they're not impeding our business, we 100% honor them, because that's key to make sure we're doing the best for our employees and our consumers.
Another question that came in is one that I've been thinking about quite a bit. You and I are tech guys. We're not psychologists. We're not, HR people, but we also work with others remotely. So from you said 24 people on your team. How do you, what kind of challenges have you had? The question was about have some employees suffered from working from home, but let me expand that there's a social aspect that we want to have that you just don't get. You talked about some of the intentional ways you can do that, but how has that, impacted your employees, and how do you work around that part?
And we've had a couple of employees. I've had folks on my team, and there have been folks on other teams that we've had to work with them, because absent that social environment, and I am a social butterfly, right? I am a crack fiend for social I need that in my life, absolutely. And my own productivity has suffered significantly. I have to stay on top of myself to make sure I'm taking this action or doing this act, and what used to just be natural, right? I'd see that person in the hall and go, oh, I need to send them this or do that. Being isolated, being remote has been really challenging. One of the very first things we did is every day, we don't do it every day anymore, but in the beginning, when we started going home in the afternoon for the last hour of every day, I said, okay, we're going to do a 1 hour long Teams meeting from 4 to 5 every day. It's optional. You don't have to join, but I'm going to dedicate my time and make sure I'm there. That anybody that wants to, and we can talk about work. We're going to all turn on our cameras. We're going to all be on audio and video, and we're going to just talk. We're going to have conversations around, did you watch that, latest episode of Marvel's What If last night? Or has anybody tried this new restaurant or takeout place? Or, other work on, who's working on this project? But it's not dedicated or required. It's a social coffee hour, right? And it's optional. If you can't make it this day, great. But I wanted to dedicate that amount of time to my team to say, I'm here for you. Now, we then began, after about 8 months, we moved that down to Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right? To say, okay, an hour, 3 days a week. And we've actually pared it down to it's Wednesday afternoons for an hour. And I'm not on there every afternoon. I've got a lot of conflicts. But the great thing is it's grown, has been so successful that the team runs it whether or not I'm there. And I might jump in at 4:30, haven't been in a half hour late because I was in a conflicting meeting. And they're talking about a topic where somebody's got a PowerPoint presentation up where they're showing the new tool that they're working on. It runs autonomously, and it's been extremely successful. Staying connected, staying collaborative. An interesting thing is we've hired 4 employees. Now, I have a team in India as well as a team in the United States. But for my U.S. resources, historically, they've all been in the Golden Triangle, in somewhere in between Louisville, Lexington, Cincinnati. We've hired significant resources in the last 2 years that aren't here. Just hired a guy in Richmond, right? We've hired We hired a guy in Detroit. We're hiring team members that not only do they not work in our office, they will never be required to because we hired them as permanent remote workers. Now, a lot of organizations have done this for years, but for my company, that was new. For internal resources, if you weren't a sales guy that was out in the field anyway, you worked near an office and you worked from that office. This has been really valuable for us to be able to expand that. But yeah, those conversations, we used to get together regularly. Cinco de Mayo this year, everybody that wanted to, because things were kind of opening up, everybody was open to it. I booked a few tables at a Mexican restaurant, and everybody that wanted to, we came and we had a happy hour and had a great time. We definitely had a happy hour for sure. It was several hours. I was very happy, but it was great. We needed to see each other. We got together, and those things are when and where you can get together face to face and you're comfortable for it. Take those opportunities. But when you can't, the tools are available to collaborate together.
I like that idea, and actually Brandon Kendall in the comments did as well. Let me say that the comment you made about hiring those remote workers, we're seeing that in West Kentucky as well, in a positive way, because we have a low cost of living and you can go find some of those remote working jobs in other areas, but is also certainly caused a challenge with local IT companies, because now they're not just competing with other local IT companies. Now they're competing with the entire globe. So that certainly makes it for a bigger challenge.
And that's a challenge that we've had because there was some Forrester research that came out just a few months ago talking about it's no longer the cost of living, it's the cost of labor, right? And what that means is that salaries in New York and San Francisco and Chicago are probably going to come down because they can hire remote, less expensive work. But it also means that rural workers in areas like West Kentucky, where I loved working for the university, I definitely loved the salary of working in a larger city for a larger company. But that was part of it, right? There was a low cost of living, so it was a great career, and I enjoyed it. But now, if you're in Paducah, if you're in Murray, if you're in even smaller, more rural areas where you could hire the guy down the street, who now can get a job, working out of Atlanta, and he's fully remote. And Atlanta would love to pay half a salary from an Atlanta resource to this guy, and he's making twice the salary that he was before. So that disparity is going to take a long time. And I think it's probably going to promote more smaller organizations to look at managed service providers or offshore organizations or nearshore organizations to reduce their costs, because low-cost labor markets, because of your geographical location in the U.S., are no longer going to be low-cost markets.
That's right. Well, we've got to wrap up. Let me finish by saying one of the other comments that was made in the chat that we didn't get to talked about, even when you're in the office nowadays, you're working remotely because so much of everything's in the cloud. So it's really where we're at. But on the note of MSPs, let me say, Drew, thank you for your time and presentation today. The feedback that I've seen, whether it's in the chat or emailed or text to me already, has been very positive. So thank you for your time in your presentation.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Now we are going to shift gears to actually talk about those MSPs. Mark Mccumber is with Volta. He is the Chief Information Security Officer for Volta. And you know what, Mark, let me make sure that you have the ability to share. Mark has been in and around tech for quite a while, more than 20 years. He got his degree in computer science from North Texas, has been at a number of organizations. I won't go through all of them, but has certainly been in this area for a long time, is currently the CISO for Volta, a managed service provider in Kentucky and a number of other areas as well. And I know that Mark will share a little bit about that. But his role as an MSP, as Drew alluded to, is changing because of our workforce, because of the evolving threats as well. And we thought that it would be important for somebody like Mark to come in, share their perspective as an MSP and what that new world is looking like. So Mark, thank you for your willingness to share with us today, and let me turn it over to you.
Thanks, Michael. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Alrighty. Good afternoon, everybody. I have a friend, or a client and a friend, who's fond of pointing out from time to time the things that could cost both of us our jobs. It's always a way for us to have a smile, but at the same time, bring into focus the mission. And one of the things I can say as somebody who's been in the managed security service provider business for a few years now is there was already a healthy fear within the MSSP community that one of your clients would get compromised, that the reputational damage, not to mention the relationship with that client directly, it's a jump ball whether it would survive that, just depending on the circumstances of the incident. So, to the point where you have some analysts in the MSSP space who get very stressed out. There's the usual alert fatigue, there are the usual stressors due to the arms race with the attacker. But there's also in the MSSP environment a certain type of individual that we run into from time to time who loses sleep over their client's security posture. So I think, when comparing yesterday's world to today's world, that healthy fear was already there. But what's changed in the last 2 years, at least for me specifically, from my vantage point, are the more deliberate efforts by the attacker to use the supply chain, and more specifically to use MSSPs as the vector to get at their eventual target. And if having one of your clients be compromised on your watch was a career limiting event, having your entire client base get compromised because you're the attack vector is a career limiting event for generations. So one of the things that brought a lot more attention to the MSSP I work for, and we started being asked to fill out vendor risk assessments, and we had meetings with our clients and with legal in some cases, was an attack in Texas that compromised 22 local governments in one fell swoop. And the vector was an application service provider they all had in common. And ransomware was the payload. And it was, a bit of a mess. And it brought some attention in 2019 to MSSPs, where we were being asked more often, what measures do you take to make sure that you aren't the infection vector for my business? You have a lot of access, you have privileged access, you have remote access. What are you doing to make sure that you're not patient zero in my environment? And some of the supply chain attacks, and depending on your definition of supply chain, have sort of scattered across the map from household, software as a service providers like Microsoft, somewhat innocuous utility companies like SolarWinds. They're very prevalent, but not what most CIOs spend a lot of time thinking about insofar as budget, security, personnel. It was a very interesting infection vector for a lot of Fortune 500 companies. And then on top of that, just sort of the inherent access that you have as an MSSP into customer environments, whether it be through VPNs, traditional VPNs, or through other remote access channels, that the MSSP makes a very attractive target for the attacker to get with, one compromise, many paydays. So we began being asked a lot of questions. And I think that prior to that, our attitude was, well, of course, we're on guard against these things. It keeps us up at night worrying that one of our clients will have an incident on our watch, much less something like this domino effect. But what we ended up finding was, just like our customers, we needed to have a security policy and procedure. We needed to have an incident response plan, and we needed to have a long list of traditional controls in place that had always been in place, but had never really been, aside from a cultural and manager to trainee communication, had never really been formalized. So some things that we had kind of drifted towards that shrunk the target for us is we don't really have any data. We don't host any data. Our financials, our customer relationship management software, our productivity apps, they're all cloud hosted. We have strict policies around cloud storage and DLP security controls in place for What we have in cloud storage, no customer data goes in our cloud storage. We use multi-factor for all internal and customer account access. We insist on it for customer account access. A movement towards zero trust just inherently means less legacy remote access, less VPN. A fair amount of what we touch, we have to do with one of our customers' engineers physically present. And some of our clients, we are issued laptops with their image and their security controls, their endpoint protection platform, their logging and continuous monitoring software, any cloud scrubbing they may do, all of it is installed on the laptop they give us to use. We use security laptops that are dedicated for scans. They have encrypted drives and they're wiped between engagements. We do a fair amount of our work within a virtualized environment, and all of our tools are in containers. It's mainly just for us, they're easier to deploy, but they're also easier to secure. We have a DevSecOps process for introducing tools into any of our security containers. Things as prosaic as everybody has a password manager that enforces no password reuse and strong credential policies. We have credentials of our own for our own email, for our own retirement, for our own healthcare, but we also have credentials for several clients. And some of our clients themselves have privileged access management tools that we check out credentials from, just like other full-time employees of that client, where others might be small to medium businesses that don't have a PAM per se, and we have remote access in a more traditional legacy way. So we need a way to manage those credentials, manage the people who are authorized to access those customer environments and do the tasks that they need for their jobs. So credential management is just like any of our clients, a fairly important piece of our program, a fairly important piece of our shrinking the target so that we're not the vector that leads to the compromise of one of our customers. You know, most of the touch points we have within clients, if we do have remote access or sandboxed, strict access control upon them, multi-factor authentication, only those jump boxes can get to certain things we need to get to. And most of our devices are enrolled in multiple mobile device management tools. And device enrollment requirements are part of our security policy and procedure as Volta employees. So we don't really have a BYOD program. If your device is, accessing any of our customer or company data, it's on a device that we issue to you or our client issues to you. The vendor risk assessments, we've written some for our clients to hand to cloud providers, to other IT business partners that may handle data. During COVID, we had a number of clients who were investigating setting up kiosks at the ingress and egress of their buildings for taking temperatures and logging them to a photo and an employee record. And this was all cloud service. And there was, basically patient health information and PII in general that was going to be sent out to the SaaS provider that these organizations had no previous business relationship with. And so they wanted some documentation in place to understand what their exposure was. Some of the basics in the vendor risk assessments we get asked to sign are, if we get breached, what is our policy and procedure? Do we have one? Yes, we do. How long before you let us know if you're breached? That's enforced on a state-by-state basis. But in our case, it's immediate. So upon knowing within an hour, I'm on the phone with every customer. The thing is, we practice these with tabletop exercises, but thankfully we haven't had to go through with it. Third-party risk assessment. So we get audited, and in many times is a byproduct of the clients that we act as an MSSP for, another auditor or auditors will be engaged by them, and the things that we do for them will be in scope. So we're party to and part of third-party risk assessments continuously. One of the things that we almost always get asked at the top of the list is just your baseline. What security controls you have in place? What is your security posture according to one of the known frameworks. And we answer that as an organization at Volta, which again, we're pretty lean IT, but we also answer it on behalf of clients. Certifications, SOC 2 compliance, various industry certifications that you might have within your staff from SANS or other accreditations are helpful in some of the vendor risk assessments. And one of the kind of table stakes that we see more and more is just having a security policy and procedure, and if not being able to provide it, being able to provide some evidence of it. These are the top ingredients we see in the VRAs that we're asked to sign by customers who might take us on as an MSSP, and as well as some of the ingredients that we're asked to put into VRAs that we broker between our clients and different providers that they do business with. I've seen this since 2019, since the Revil attacks in Texas become less. It used to be kind of an outlier, maybe when you were working with a financial institution or somebody who was larger and more formal, to being something that we do pretty much with everybody these days. Some other things that I think all of my customers identify with, they're doing it, but we do a lot of it is security awareness training. Our employees are to the point they don't trust email as a communications or correspondence medium by default. They just by default don't trust email. We try to help them understand that their credentials could be a very important initial vector in an attack, and that they are the most important corporate data that they possess, and that the password policies that we have in place are for all of our own protection and for all of our own families' protection. This company is how we feed our families, and our clients' data, and particularly our access to our clients' data via these credentials, is paramount. And we emphasize it. And there's a fair amount of continuous emphasis placed upon it. We have a security policy and a security procedure, and what you can and can't do with your accounts, with your computers, and with your data spelled out, and it's continuously reinforced. We do DLP and business email compromise training. We don't do financial transactions on the strength of electronic communication by default. So an email is not going to reroute payment of an invoice to a different account number. We are not going to route information about an invoice because it was requested by email. We don't do business over email. We have systems to do business. Emails for us a tool for initiating a transaction through a formal system that we have continuous monitoring on, that has MFA, that protects us against business email compromise. We have strict personal device policies as far as, we do use cloud productivity apps, so you can check your email from anywhere in the world, but we don't have people saving PDFs or any company data on insecure access, on insecure endpoints. Some of the clients that we work with we have to give particular guidance. If it's a healthcare client, if it's a public sector client, a private sector client, a utilities customer, financial services customer, there's different standard operating procedures within those environments and different ways we work with those clients. Like I said, some of our clients, we don't really necessarily have what you would call formal remote access. We set up sessions together over the web or in person, and we do the work together. We have non-repudiation, we have redundancy that way. Security awareness training is huge for us to make sure that we instigate a culture where we take great care with client data and our credentials. We use a fair amount of compartmentalization, not just from group memberships and files in the traditional IT controls, but just socially. It's not a common practice for us to gossip about what's going on within clients amongst people within the organization who don't directly interact with a client. We do a fair amount of over communication with our clients. We emphasize chain of command communication, less so than east-west lateral communication. We try to always think ahead if somebody left for, maybe they hit the lottery or they got an opportunity to relocate someplace they've always wanted to live, or any number of reasons we might have a resource on our technical team leave the business, we're always planning about replacing anybody at any given time and making sure that we cross-train and make sure that we have clear documentation through our ticketing system, through our correspondence and communication with the chain of command and our customers, but also throughout the workforce, we have at least 2 people who can do everything. We have that redundancy built into all of our playbooks. Compartmentalization isn't, something that we have strict guidelines around, but it's just kind of a culture. It's, it's easy when you have salespeople to let what's happening with your clients not be effectively compartmentalized if you don't have conversations around, what is and what isn't something that should be repeated. And I don't expect our people to always instinctively know what is and isn't confidential and off the record. If we didn't talk to our clients as much and we didn't correspond with them as much, there would be less worry about need to know. But we have a ton of communication. We have a ton of alerts. We have a ton of tickets. We have regular cadence meetings. And it's endemic in us to think hard about what we repeat. So that's, I think, probably table stakes for most MSSPs, but it maybe doesn't get talked about in a public setting as much. It's something we kind of make sure we have conversations about as we onboard, and it sort of comes up all the time organically. We do incident response planning. We just did a tabletop exercise. We do TTXs with our clients that are always continuously kind of reinforcing things we may want to think about. Doing them with clients is good from a muscle memory perspective for us. But I think that, from my direct firsthand experience, the more we practice our plan, the more when it comes time to execute the plan, it is done with a sort of muscle memory as opposed to that adrenaline rush that comes with something you've never done before. And I've found that even in tabletop exercises with customers where I know their environments, our team knows their environment very, very intimately, that we still have moments where surprises might arise in the tabletops are things that we realize we may need to add to our documentation and our incident response plan, add to create an appendice for that particular scenario that come up organically sometimes in these exercises. And we'd rather have it happen while we're spending a few hours basically modeling a scenario rather than living through a live scenario. So we've seen more CISA get involved, more with doing TTXs with various qualifying agencies, public sector mostly. And I've seen lots of MSSPs find a fair amount of popularity offering tabletop exercises and IR simulations for clients. I don't think those are necessary for anybody who might be listening to this talk. There's a lot of tabletop exercises out there on the internet. You can do them yourself, and they can be as informal or formal as you want to make them. But we get this reinforced again by proximity to our clients, but we do them for ourselves. And I think that they've been valuable, along with security awareness training, to change the mentality or reinforce the mentality at our company of being good custodians of our credentials and data. And that is pretty much the content I wanted to talk about. What, as far as the landscape changing in the last couple of years. The thing I will say about mobile work, to piggyback on the last discussion, is from a mobile work perspective, our lives haven't changed much here at Volta. We were on client sites or accessing clients from remote sites prior to the pandemic. And the pandemic hasn't changed our lives a great deal. There's obviously less face-to-face, and there's less, lunches, and maybe less shoulder to shoulder at client sites, but not dramatically so on the cybersecurity side. so we were already kind of zero trust, and we were already highly remote and already having to think about what a secured endpoint looked like and what a trusted user looked like before pandemic. It's just become easier and more commonplace to get all of the linkage and infrastructure in place to enable that, now that my clients are having to do it for their entire business.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's a really interesting, there's several things that you said that I wrote down, and some that I want to talk to you about or ask questions about today. And some of it I want to follow up with you on. We actually have a class in our graduate program where we help students walk students through creating their own tabletop exercise scenario and how they would design that and build it for a company. So I certainly want to follow up with you afterwards and talk about that. But let me ask a couple of questions. So you said the conversations with in the last year haven't changed a whole lot when you're talking about the vulnerability or the vendor threat assessments and some of those pieces. I know enough about Volta to know that you all have some really large clients and you also have some small ones. So I think that there's some small businesses in our region that realize that they need to be asking these questions of their MSPs, but they may not even know what the question is. And a lot of this stuff, actually everything you shared, I understood. But if you told that to some of our small businesses, that the only thing they might take away is that you're doing a lot, because you all are doing a bunch. I mean, I feel like you are probably prepared and the steps you're taking are appropriate, but how do you communicate all that to an organization that doesn't understand this at all?
Well, so a couple of things. The conversations haven't changed a great deal in the last year because they really began changing a ton in 2019 when those 22 municipalities in Texas got hit. And the COVID has just kind of, added icing to that cake. As far as vendor risk assessments, vendor security agreements, I think for our SMB customers who may not know what to ask, or even if you gave them a one pager of here's some questions you should ask, they wouldn't necessarily know what to do with the responses. Like, what are your security controls? They get the responses. They don't know what the security controls are. They know there's a lot of words and acronyms in there. That's where I think an MSSP can come in, and where we've come in for clients, where we go over what the vendor security agreement is with our client, explain to them, the terminology, what each one of these things does for them in as clear a manner as possible, then broker the passing of that vendor security agreement to the provider that they're entertaining doing business with, broker any conversations and questions they may have about the questionnaire, any conversations and questions they may have about us, and then get that document back to the client and say, okay, these guys, we did a cloud posture assessment. We looked at all of their historical financials. We looked at their breach history. We've done some OSINT on them. They are a very reputable organization, and respond back to your vendor security agreement were more than acceptable as far as breach notification, as far as the different certifications they have, the audits they undergo. We give them an A. And so we kind of I do boil it down to a letter grade. Some people do it with a number. We do leverage some third-party intelligence providers for that. So it's not just us getting on Google. But that would be a way, a low cost, as needed, time and materials engagement for a client without a dedicated cyber staff, or somebody who's intimidated by those questionnaires, the way they could do that. The other way would be reach out to your technical advocates at Murray State, to your higher ed peers, because it is an ecosystem. They a one pager, and you can understand at a high level when you get the responses back to your one pager. If you don't, you can refer to your peer and say, look, this is what they came back with. How does this, check out from your perspective? I have friends who do that all the time, who, are in the trades, and a lot of their financials and these days in the trades are no longer on-prem. And, they've got they don't have an IT department, and they ask questions and favors about interacting with different software as a service providers that they do business with. And so I think there's, you get to a certain size of a small business, and some of it is the old broker and barter system where you just find somebody you can trust who can consult you. But I know, Michael, you're one of those people who in your community, just like at home, when the computer breaks, you're the first guy they call. So,
well, and that happens a lot. I've actually had that phone call several times about, what do you think about this or that, or it may be cybersecurity related. I get a lot of broadband questions of late as well. But one of the questions that came in, and let me make sure everybody knows, if you have a question for Mark, please put it in the chat, and I'll make sure I have a program that's aggregating all of those chat questions or chat comments, so I'm able to see those and relay those to Mark. One of the questions is, what requirements does an MSP have to meet to contract with a federal agency?
Well, it depends. SOC 2 compliance anymore is table stakes. Some federal agencies, you need to have a specific, anybody who interacts with agency data has to have a specific level of clearance. And so what I've noticed over the years, that the defense contractors that specialize in interacting with the federal government, specifically the three-letter agencies inside the Beltway, are top secret. They have top secret level clearance personnel, typically ex-federal government top secret clearance personnel. And there's a bit of a private sector, public sector exchange of personnel. And as you get out into the states, specifically into the Midwest, the MSSPs that do business with the federal government become fewer and farther between. State and local, typically there's a drug test for all your people, background checks for all your people. There are credit and financial health checks. As far as specific certifications on the technical aptitude side, they really run the gamut. Working with some cities, if there's a good list of references or a relationship there, they're not interested in any specific certifications. At a state level, you see more interest in NIST and ISO framework and certification documentation, security policies and procedures, and incident response plans sometimes get asked for. Those vendor security agreements sometimes get asked for. But SOC 2 would probably be the biggest one we get asked about. And then as far as incident response handling, they might ask if you have a GCIH on staff. For project management, do you have a PMP certified project management planner? Specific silos of technologies, if you're dealing with a specific brand of security control, we sometimes get asked what our certification level is for that particular technology. So those come up. Sometimes they come up in RFPs, but on the federal side, it's probably right up there with financial services, the most difficult to get things kicked off with.
How has remote work, you spoke a little bit about this, but let me ask you to go into it a little bit more. How has remote work positively impacted the work environment and productivity with Volta? Or maybe the way that you're working with clients, because you mentioned that part a little bit as well.
Well, we're probably a curiosity because the owner of the company is traditional, and had made a pretty big investment in new office space prior to COVID, literally a quarter before COVID hit in 2020. And we do have kind of a close-knit culture, and we have a SOC with all the pretty monitors and all the pretty desks, and we use it in our marketing collateral. And there's a fair amount of cross-pollination with our level one analysts in that SOC, and it's good stuff. They eat together, they share interesting tooling and bits of information and code and scripting. But, for the most part, because the attacker never sleeps and we're a 24/7, 365 shop, most of the cyber teams, whether it be 24/7 SOC, where we've got 2 people on staff in the SOC all the time, or level 2 and level 3 folks, we were nomads anyway. We would be in a data center on Monday. We would be in Zooms all day on Tuesday. We'd be in the office on Wednesday. We'd be on the road on Thursday. And so we might be doing a cut on Saturday night. We were already kind of working as a mobile workforce prior to the pandemic. What happened with COVID, where we had to tell people you can't come to the office, is we did see certain people, there was they said they had a sharp increase in productivity because no commute. Some of our people have a 45, 60-minute commute. Some days they're starting work at 6:30, 7 o'clock with their first cup of coffee, and they, aside from grabbing a snack here or there, they really don't get away from the computer till the news is on at night. And before they know it, they've worked a 10, 11, 12-hour day. No one's asking them to do that. No one's cracking the whip for them to do that. It's what they did. So some of our back office people and people who traditionally came into the office would tell you that they were more productive. I think it also, from a human level, when you have little ones, you look at the cost of having somebody look after them, it was, a big, from a cultural perspective, a big relief on several of our families. There really wasn't an option but for them to go work from home, regardless of COVID, because of the ripple effects of needing to take care of their children. And so there was mostly a positive increase in productivity. There was no drop off in customer satisfaction. We were already accessing our customers' environments in non-traditional and sometimes eccentric ways. And the pandemic just sort of formalized all that for the people who weren't frontline tech workers. The one sidebar I would put on that is there were some folks on the team, frontline technical workers namely, who did experience some depression because they missed the interaction with the other engineers. They missed the launching, the cutting up, the TikTok video exchange. And we have Google Chat, we have texting, we have email, we have Discord, we have Zoom. I mean, these folks are on 5, 6 different communications channels, so it's not like they weren't in contact. But we did see that there were certain personalities, there's certain types of personalities within our workforce that, being home, maybe they don't have little ones, and maybe they're home alone all day in front of a Zoom meeting, and it got to be a grind. I have to say I wasn't afforded that luxury. I was still in front of customers. I was still in data centers. I was on Zoom, but my day-to-day didn't change a whole lot compared to pre-pandemic, because just some of the things that we have to do in our roles don't allow us to be in any one place all the time. So I think it varies widely from person to person and business to business. But again, a lot of being an MSSP is you're never off. You're 24/7, 365. So, I mean, I've rolled out of bed or pulled all-nighters, and so has every member on our team for years prior to the pandemic. And so it was just sort of a formalization of the work mode we were already in.
Mm-hmm. Last question, and actually, I'll let you hit the highlights on this one, because this could be another presentation or 20 to answer this fully. What options do companies have for securing their organization in regards to remote workers, contractors using their own workstations that aren't company supplied resources?
So that's a problem. An insecure endpoint that can access customer data, you have no real way to enforce data loss prevention. You have no visibility. If that endpoint gets infected because one of the kids is on it, it becomes an infection vector when it retains remote access to its partner. So one tool is policy, which is you can't do that. That's not allowed. That's grounds for termination. So that's one of the tools we wield, to be frank here. The second is that before a device is allowed to access company data, We have some device posturing, profiling, and onboarding that takes place, and the device is registered with the environment. And there are a variety of tools out there in the mobile device management and the network and mission control world that can help solve that technical issue. Another less technically heavy lift for less technically mature or smaller organizations would be just providing a baseline of security that you require for devices to attach to the business. And I'm thinking back to some of my friends in the trades, that you might say, look, the bare minimum, you need to have some kind of endpoint protection platform, and at the bare minimum, we need to make sure that you're running, patches that have, you're on the latest Windows patches for the last 30 days. Those are the two bare minimum things before you can connect. But policy against insecure endpoints accessing the company is not uncommon. If devices that aren't company managed are to connect, there are technical controls you can put in place to profile them and enforce that certain baseline commitments are made on the device before it attaches. And third would be something more informal, like, hey, if you don't have this endpoint protection platform software, I can provide it to you as my friend and partner. And before you get on the network, let's just make sure you're patched and the latest revision on XYZ on your endpoint. And okay, yeah, then let's do business together. But those are some off the top of the head. You're right, that could be a whole how-to discussion.
Yeah. Well, we'll wrap it up there as we're out of time. But Mark, thank you so much for sharing with us today. I think the managed service, the MSP, MSSP world has changed quite a bit over the last handful of years, not just because of COVID, but because, as you talked about, some of the changing threats, the threat landscape's changed, and I think it's a really interesting space, and one that a lot of the folks that are listening in today, whether it be technology professionals or small business or business professionals, are really trying to wrap their hands around it as well. So thank you for your insight. Thank you for your comments, and we really appreciate the time today.
Thank you, Michael. My pleasure.
Well, we're going to shift gears quite a bit now. We're going to go from talking about the security aspects to talking about technology and innovation. Now, I will say that we're still talking about remote work in many ways. We're still talking about our rural area. We're still talking about what we can do in our region. And let me introduce Dr. Stapleton by way of a brief story. There was a group of folks in Paducah that wanted to do something with technology, innovation, entrepreneurship, and we didn't know what we wanted to do. And Monica Belak, who was one of those people, she went to various places looking at models that might work in Paducah. We went to a number of places. She literally traveled the globe looking for models that might work in Paducah. And the best model, the best partner that we could possibly find literally anywhere in the world for Paducah, for West Kentucky, was just up the road in Cape Girardeau. And so here we are literally spanning the globe trying to find the right fit. And the right fit for us was an hour and a half away. So we went to Codify in Cape Girardeau, met Dr. Stapleton a handful of years ago, and I think he'll probably share a little bit of his story in his presentation, so I won't steal any of that thunder. But Dr. Stapleton has worked in higher education, but more importantly, and what he will tell you is that he's an entrepreneur. That he is an entrepreneur at heart, and specifically in the tech space. He has expertise in coding. He has expertise in working with businesses that take advantage of technology and coding, and tried to build that ecosystem so that in a rural area like West Kentucky, like Paducah, like Cape Girardeau, that these technology-based businesses can thrive in a digital economy but still be in our rural community. So we in Paducah and West Kentucky, we have started working with Codify on a more formal manner of trying to expand some of those cool things that they're doing in Cape Girardeau into West Kentucky, and wanted to hear from Dr. Stapleton today so that he can share a little bit about the success they've had in Southeast Missouri and a little bit about what we've already done in West Kentucky, but more importantly, what's going to be coming up. And I want you all to hear this from two perspectives. First of all, learn from Dr. Stapleton because he's pretty awesome and has a lot of knowledge to share. But second of all, I want you to hear from him today about how you can get involved. There are a ton of opportunities, whether you're a remote worker that you need some of that social interaction, whether you have an idea for a business startup, looking for a job, looking for a project, looking for employees, whatever it might be, there's a place in this realm for you. And Dr. Stapleton will be able to share some of that ecosystem and how that all fits together over the next little bit. As he shares, if you have a question, please make sure you put it in the chat window, and either I'll interrupt him and ask the question, or I'll ask him questions when he finishes. But with that, Dr. Stapleton, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Michael. You able to hear me okay?
I can hear you, yes.
Great. Thanks, and thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure for me to join the conference. I recognize that the topic is a bit of a leap from some of the more centralized kind of specific things that you were having presented before, and I hope I'm able to, as you did in your opening remarks, kind of bridge that gap a bit. I as Michael said, really sort of started my career as a young guy, not really having been around sort of entrepreneurs or business class people. My family, really both my parents didn't finish high school. They were hardworking laborers in a tiny little town in the central part of Kansas. But I'd met a gentleman when I was 16 years old who sort of opened my eyes to the opportunities in the business world. And so I spent the first 15 years of my working career sort of building and helping build software and internet-based companies, for the most part in small rural communities. And so I'll really try to put into context the importance of the digital economy, and frankly, how hard it has been for rural regions like West Kentucky and Southeast Missouri to really benefit from the amazing growth that it's really spurred across the country and across the globe. And as Michael said, then try in some ways to sort of tell you our long story about how we've sort of incrementally over several years really worked to identify a model allowing us to kind of deploy an ecosystem of different activities and structures and programs that are actually improving our ability in these regions to benefit from what's going on in the digital world. So I think I may just begin, Michael, really by I'll share my screen, and if it flops on me, you can help me out a bit. And this is always dangerous for me because I'm a guy who has 7,000 tabs open and and Windows. So thumbs up there, Michael. That look good.
Swap the screens. We see your presenter slide.
Let me just do it through. Better? PDF doesn't want to play. All right, bear with me. I'll get there, Michael.
That's all right. While he's doing that, let me make sure I said about putting your questions in the chat window. Also, make sure that you share. I'm sorry, not share, that you either like the Facebook page that you're watching this on or subscribe to the YouTube channel that you're watching this on. We will make sure that we put together the videos of our presenters. We'll also probably share some additional videos regarding our speakers and some of the topics that they're talking about today. So with that, Dr. Staples, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Michael. I'm actually going to just pull up a video quickly that I think tells the sort of story of Codify and really what's important to us, what we've been working on, sort of the mission driving it. It'll connect, I think, with a variety of careers in the sort of world that Michael, your program exists in. And actually, Michael, do you have this deck handy?
I do. I can do the deck. Let me see if I can probably, well, I can certainly show have the deck. Do you want me to do the deck or the video?
It'd be great if you could just pull in the video first and then go to the deck, and I'll make the rest of my comments there.
All right.
Should have sound. I'm not hearing the sound, Michael.
May not have sound set up on my Zoom, so you may not have your sound.
That's okay. Well, let's pop out of here. Let's pop out of here and go to the deck.
Okay, I apologize for that.
No worries.
I will share the link to the video in the chat so that everybody will have that. And let me pull up your. All right.
Yeah, that looks good. Thanks. Sorry for those problems, guys. So what that video would have sort of shared with you was a perspective from a national partner of ours of sort of how over time we've combined these really interesting elements of both workforce development and business development into a model really that's generating outstanding economic impact, and then and telling that story from the context of an individual who about 5 years ago had 6 years ago had a terrible motorcycle accident, became a paraplegic. At the time, the individual was actually I guess his vocation was he was a mechanic, successful in doing that, and found himself unable, obviously, to do that any longer. And we met Zach at that time, and he was one of the first participants in a software developer training program that we have called Code Labs. That's a full stack web development training program. And he now leads that program 5 years later, a program that we're deploying in across West Kentucky and Southern Missouri. And actually, great story. So if you get a chance, go watch that video. So coming back to sort of where my journey begins, one of the things we do when we assess new ventures and the founders of those new ventures as investors or organizations like Codify who support new founders is really to try to gauge what the level of passion is from the founder. So I mentioned that I started my first company when I was 17 years old. For 15 years, that's all I did. I went through the startup development and exit of about 6 different software and internet-based companies. I can tell you a lot of stories. I can give you a lot of lessons learned. The one thing I can tell you is it's hard. It really takes a lot of sacrifice and work. And so that requires a level of passion that, to be honest, most people who are employees may not be familiar with. So we're always really trying to screen for that, like really measure what level of passion someone has if they're going to try to start, especially a technology-based business. So, that's what drives me. That, as Michael said, this sort of entrepreneurial spirit or mindset. Some days, frankly, I feel like it's an illness, but it is passion. And so when I moved to Missouri 15 years ago, about 2 years into my work at Southeast Missouri State University, I was given this great gift in life, which is the passion I'm pursuing now. And it was through a research-based project that I did. That research-based project allowed me to meet Michael and others at Murray State and in West Kentucky. I was asked by a federal agency that does work in the Delta region, the lower Mississippi Delta region, to try to figure out where new jobs were coming from in the economies or communities they serve in 252 counties and parishes. And a long story short, new jobs come from new companies. And the insight that really led to this new passion of mine is that most of those communities were really not being led by economic development professionals or elected individuals who knew that much about the digital economy. And we find ourselves now in most of these communities sort of 2 generations into where most people in these communities just are consumers of technology and really are not participating in either the entrepreneurial or workforce sides, the opportunities provided for occupations or to build businesses that employ people in digital fields. And so that became my passion. It's something that I know about, I know how to do. I didn't know all of the pieces that really were required to put a system together to make it happen. But I was given this gift really, and that's the passion that serves me now. Michael, if you want to click forward 2 slides. So the way I try to introduce this sort of topic is, sort of talking about why rural communities need a tech boom. If you look at that green map of the primary aspects of the United States, that represents rural. Based on the way that the United States federal government describes rural, those are the land masses that make up rural communities. And for a long time, really going back 3 decades, rural communities have in many ways been in decline compared to their larger counterparts. So forget for a moment the last 3 decades and just think for a moment about the sort of pre-COVID years of 2014 to 2018, arguably the fastest growing, most robust economic growth in maybe the country's history. And if you think about, really what was going on during those years, it just seemed like everybody had a job, businesses were growing just about across every sector. And during those same years, 43% of rural counties actually had negative employment growth. So largest, fastest expansion of our economy in the country, almost half of the rural counties in the country didn't really benefit from an employment standpoint, and half of them had net losses of businesses, the number of business establishments in those counties. If you'll click to the next slide. So this, the need for this tech boom isn't just one that's sort of driven by empathy for individuals and companies in these rural counties. The country needs it. There was a study done by the Corn Consulting Group that estimates that the US economy risks losing $160 billion in annual revenue by 2030 if we don't fix some of the tech talent shortage. I don't know about you, that's a pretty big number. It sort of reminds us of how much we're competing globally for talent, and how companies that struggle finding talent, regardless of where they find it, are going to struggle competing globally. And that same study talked with HR recruiters in companies around the country, and found that their number one recruiting challenge was recruiting technical workers, specifically cyber and software development related talent. At the same time, so number one challenge of those recruiters. At the same time, in that green space on that map, there are 37 million working age adults, many of whom are earning a third of what their counterparts are earning in metro and urban areas. And 15% of the American economy now is being driven by workers. 15% of American workers have technology-based jobs, I should say, and only 5% of that in rural regions. So I don't think there's any question that the country is having this discussion now post-COVID about something that's hard, but is really this concept of a rural tech boom. Next slide, please. So Michael mentioned we started Codify about 7 years ago with the mission to create a set of opportunities where individuals that lived in rural communities, especially in the Southeast Missouri and Cape Girardeau area where we started, would have an opportunity for better occupations. If you think about the industries that have driven growth in the 70s, 80s, and beginning maybe of the 90s in rural communities, most of those industries have declined. And so the kingpin, if you will, of the challenge that we have faced in rural communities is the lack of high quality, high wage jobs and occupations. I view jobs and occupations differently. Jobs a thing you can go out and get pretty quickly, and occupations a thing you may spend your life doing. The wonderful thing about digital occupations is they provide ladders. They provide, it seems like really an endless amount of demand for skills in digital occupations. And so one of the challenges in trying to provide these occupational opportunities in rural communities is there often are also not that many companies that employ individuals with those skills. And so what you end up with is this challenge where you have to create a system that both generates supply of talent, working with higher education institutions, colleges and universities in traditional programs, but also trying to catalyze aggressively the growth of new entrants into the talent pool, but at the same time help drive the additional growth of companies that employ those types of individuals. And I think the previous presenter may have been talking a little bit about remote work, and yeah, it's obvious that in our world, in the digital world, we've been doing remote work forever. I started building software-based companies in the late 80s, and even then we had people who worked remotely. So this actually provides us a really good opportunity to solve some of these problems in rural communities. So we've developed a pretty intricate set of programs and a model that a couple of years ago we started working, as Michael said, with he and other leaders in the region to start helping deploy. And it really does include this idea of the sort of employment aspects, education and training aspects of programs that we include in this element called Works. It includes efforts to try to start and help more existing businesses grow in the technical aspects of their company. which often requires access to risk capital that is not very well organized in a lot of rural areas quite yet, and then places to do that. So, one of the things that we have obviously learned from seeing other metro and urban areas as they developed these sort of startup and innovation-based hotbeds was that there were these physical spaces, places where people would get together, collaborate, learn from each other, partner with each other. And so we have to create those through this model as well. So one of the things we'll talk about a little bit is how close we are to actually being able to open a co-working facility in the old Coca-Cola bottling plant in Paducah, a new space that's being created for some of these programs. Michael, go ahead and bump to the next slide. So let me go through pretty quickly just how the system is kind of broken down, the pieces of it, and then we'll get to the end and really just spend more time kind of talking, hopefully in discussion about what we're doing specifically in West Kentucky and where we see that going. So this idea of how we connect, how people in the digital world connect, one of those is in sort of co-working or remote working centers. We built a really fabulous facility in Cape Girardeau about 6 years ago now. It's in a downtown district that had 4 of the largest buildings in the community that were vacant and at different times being talked about being torn down, all of which are full now, and a thriving sort of small tech district. And so we wanted to emulate that in Paducah, and the Coke building is an amazing opportunity to do that. So we're starting with a space there where individuals can come, and founders of startup companies that we're recruiting to the community will be there. Training programs where people will be learning more about how to enter occupations in cyber and blockchain development and application development will all be able to connect there. We work with universities often to provide internship opportunities so that students who are either in business or in one of these technical fields get an opportunity before it's real, to put their hands on what it's like to be around a early stage company or an existing business trying to grow through technology. And we're looking forward to doing some of that in the region as well. We have a program in Cape Girardeau called the Red Hawk Startup Fellowship that we're trying to work with Murray and others to try to emulate there in Paducah as well. And then we often do the same kinds of things that Michael is great at promoting and providing in the region. Some opportunities for students and professionals to get together and sort of share in their understanding and exploration of technology. And we have a particular program in Cape Girardeau that we have partnered with a company called Vizient, and something called a Give Back Hack, where we do sort of a multi-month development of projects and product for local nonprofits, sort of really pulling together the digital community. Next slide, Michael. So I mentioned this idea of how to create demand. So how do we actually help individuals who want to start technology-based businesses? How do we attract a critical mass of more technology-based businesses? How do we help them grow? And then, how do we give investors an opportunity to participate in the development of those businesses and those companies access to risk capital? So we have 4 programs that we're deploying in the region. You may have heard a recent announcement about one of them, First 50K. It's a program where we actually recruit companies. So we go find companies from around the world that are in early stages of development, that are software technology based, and offer them an opportunity to pick up a $50,000 non-dilutive seed investment, and in return for relocating their business to Paducah. In this case, we just announced 3 companies. They're companies from Atlanta, from California, and one from St. Louis. All companies that are relocating will open in the new Sprocket co-working space in early October. And It's a program that we've been doing for several years. We had over 200 applications from states all over the country and 13 countries around the world. So one of the things you may have picked up on in the news is that one of the shining spots of the struggling economy during COVID has been the startup sector. Startups are actually flourishing, and it often happens in sort of recessionary times that sometimes out of desire, sometimes out of not having any other choices, innovative people go out and start their own businesses. We'll be announcing a pre-accelerator that we've actually had a beta version of going in West Kentucky for a while. It's a way to help local individuals really get off to the right start in creating their own software-based business. Pre-accelerator meaning very early stage, going from idea to sort of a validated model and ready to raise some money and start selling product. And a couple other programs there as well. We actually are working in an innovation accelerator we called the West Kentucky Innovation Challenge with 4 local companies to really build some software-based product on top of their own industry knowledge. And then lastly, an investor network that we're beginning to put together there as well. These companies all require some capital to get them going. And so we're working on that as well. And then something you may be a little more interested in is really how we start preparing more and more people to enter the occupations in this world. So we have a really cool youth program that has participants in it in a variety of schools in West Kentucky called the Youth Coding League. It's a 5th through 8th grade after school program where students get to learn about coding. They use a open source Google curriculum that we've basically built a league around. We have 50 plus teams, or about 70 teams now in 7 states. It's really 1,500 players this semester. That program looks to be something like 200 teams in 10 or 15 states going into next fall. But a great opportunity, especially in rural places, to expose young people to what it's like not just to play with software or to experience video games and the like, but actually what it's like to build it. And the competitive element just makes it a lot of fun. There's actually McNabb in Paducah was actually a very competitive school last semester. We also have this adult coding immersive training program that I mentioned. With modern sort of high-level languages, sometimes to get started on an employment track in entry-level software development jobs, we need a little less foundational knowledge than we might have years and years ago. And best practices have shown that we can help sort of working age adults who maybe have bounced from job to job and struggled a bit, get started, just enough skill to really start doing some entry-level development. It's not the equivalent of a 4-year computer science degree. It's not that at all, but it is a gateway into the occupation where then we can surround those individuals with additional training, additional education opportunities. And we're doing this currently in Paducah. We have 2 cohorts going on in the city of Paducah and other cohorts going on around in the region. We have the training is delivered by professional software developers, not teachers per se, and has been extremely successful. It's a nationally recognized program that's supported by federal agencies, a variety of them, and something we're actually working on adding some blockchain programs to it. In Missouri, we're working on adding cybersecurity version of it as well. A discussion we've had with Michael and some potential to do something similar in West Kentucky, and even some quality assurance and analyst tracks that we're developing out as well. The other great thing about these jobs is that if you decide to have to live in a place in Western Kentucky and raise your family there, obviously you're not bound to work for local companies. There's a lot of remote employer opportunities, and we have developed something with a federal partner called the National Rural Source Employment Network, sort of marketplace that we hope to launch in the next several months, really to provide opportunities to connect some of the talent in rural communities, not just to local employers, but national employers as well. So to give you an idea of what this means to the communities that we're working in from 2016 through 2020 in Cape, we were able to help create over 270 jobs. We worked with 57 startup companies. We trained 1,350 youth and adult coders, and the companies that we supported were actually able to raise about $43 million. So this is the kind of economic impact that communities are really needing and looking for. We have worked with some economic analysts that project that just the jobs alone that we've helped create, probably in the next year or so, the total economic impact in just Cape Girardeau will exceed $100 million. And so it's the kind of thing that helps add to the other efforts going on in the communities to provide good occupations, good quality of life to families. And we're happy to have started that work in Paducah as well. So that's one of the big strategic projects that Codify is working on, obviously, to sort of take the model that we learned and perfected some over a 7-year period in Southeast Missouri and plant it in West Kentucky. We're also working on some of the large projects that are similar, but becoming more and more regional. It takes a lot of time and resources to do this. We have a fairly large team. Codify staff has 22 full-time employees. Several of those are located in West Kentucky. Others are remote, even from Missouri. But we have to have the partnership of federal, state, local organizations to be able to provide the resources to be able to provide these programs to individuals, especially at low or no cost, which is something that's a part of many of our programs. I mentioned that we're a part of this national network. So what's great is that this work is being focused on and done across the country. And so in Paducah and Cape Girardeau, we're connected through something called the Center on Rural Innovation that's supported by the Department of Commerce in the United States government to try to spur on this kind of work in a variety of places. A great network to really share best practices and resources and talent. And over in Missouri, something that we're really excited about is a new program that we're calling Innovate Southern Missouri, where we're really taking what started out similarly to West Kentucky in Southeast Missouri, a handful of communities, and we're working with Missouri State University in Springfield, with Southeast Missouri State University in Cape Girardeau, and really connecting these communities across the entire southern region in the deployment of this work and sharing of these resources. So we're excited about that. So a few lessons learned, and then I'm really interested in a discussion with Michael and others who might have questions. It's it's as the really popular book says, it's hard to do hard things, and so communities of our types just kind of got left out of the digital economy in this sort of tech boom. And so to go back and sort of make up for lost time and pull the individuals and expertise and resources together to do this is difficult. It takes a lot of partnership. One of the challenges is that it can't be done overnight. So you can't just do one thing, and you can't hope that it generates impact overnight. And since these kinds of programs are supported by both private and public resources, that becomes a challenge, because to the extent that elected officials are involved in decisions about making investments in some of these programs, long-term is a hard thing. Election cycles are pretty short. And so it's sometimes hard to really understand, for everybody to understand it, it takes some time, and we'll chip away at it and be able to have some success. It involves entrepreneurial thinking people. So even though some of these programs may seem like they're sort of nonprofit based or they're public sector based, I've worked for 15 years in this field and seen lots of failed efforts, most of the time not because people didn't have their hearts in the right place, but they weren't quite as entrepreneurial as they needed to be, and understood how to take a buck and stretch it and stretch it and stretch it like entrepreneurs know how to do. And then lastly, it just takes a bunch of partnerships. So the kind of partnerships like with Sprocket, the local nonprofit that's really trying to spur on innovation and education and in the economy, coming across the river and inviting us over, and then being able to work with people like Michael and others who are leaders in the community to put the pieces of that whole system together. It can't just be, an individual organization or a handful of individuals that can make all this happen. So as we work with other communities and regions across the country to talk about how this might be possible in their necks of the woods, these are the kinds of things that we always share. So Michael, I'm sure will share out my contact information, and I'm a person that constantly works and loves what I do, and so I'm always happy to try to help, to try to provide whatever resources that I can and answering questions I can, which I look forward to now.
Well, let me start with I have a question that has come in, but let me share a comment first. Brandon Kendall, one of our attendees, said visited the space in Cape. Amazing transformation in the downtown area. Was blown away, frankly, being going to Cape since a kid in the 80s. Absolute turnaround. And I'll echo. I mean, it's pretty amazing. Question the first question I have is, if somebody wants to get involved with what you're doing in Kentucky, and I know this answer, but I'm going to ask you the question anyway. How should they get involved? How can they learn more about the opportunities to get involved in Kentucky?
Yeah, so Michael, something that's been really helpful in trying to help speed up the generation of the kind of success we've had here in Paducah is having a local on-the-ground partner in Sprocket. And I think with yours, the rest of the board of that organization, Monica and their staff, the best thing really to do is to become a part of and follow and get engaged in the work that Sprocket's doing. There's some work that they're doing that's outside, obviously, what we've partnered with them to do. But that, I think, is the easiest way for folks to really figure out. One of the challenges in always talking about this and presenting about it is there's 1,000 pieces. It's hard to talk about. It's confusing to hear about, and it takes several times before someone runs through this or gets to put their hands on it before most people go, oh, now I get it. I understand sort of what you're doing here. The great thing is soon we're going to cut the ribbon on that co-working space, Sprocket's co-working space in the Coke plant, and that'll be a great place to have those discussions. But I'd love for anyone to reach out to Monica at Sprocket or reach out to myself. Michael and other really capable folks serve on that board, and figure out not only how individuals can help, but where there might be pockets of opportunities for us to help companies, existing and individuals who want to start companies, and make sure that we get those folks pulled into our resources and how we can help them.
And let me add, if you're watching this video now live or even in a day or two, if you comment in the video chat, then I'll get a notification and I'll make sure that you get the right contact for Sprocket and for Codify. Codify, Dr. Stapleton's contact information is on the screen. His website's on there, and you'll be able to find that information. And I actually think tomorrow afternoon, if you want to actually sit down and have a chat with Sprocket and some of the folks, like-minded folks, I believe it's tomorrow at the Coke plant. The Coke plant also, not only is it home to Sprocket, it's also home to Mellow Mushroom and Dry Ground Brewery, and they have a happy hour, social hour thing on Friday afternoon. So if you want to connect with some of the other like-minded folks, there'll be an opportunity to do that and have some of those discussions on Friday. Another question, if you aren't looking to live in a big city as a startup job, is there still money, jobs to be made somewhere else?
Yeah, a good question. And the answer is absolutely. I do think one of the things that is a positive outcome of COVID is that founders of technology-based companies were reminded that you really can develop those companies anywhere where there's talent and anywhere where there are the resources that you need. So what I mean by that specifically is, are there the kind of venture capital resources in McCracken County that there are in Silicon Valley? No. Do there need to be to help support startup companies that would love to locate in Paducah, McCracken County, West Kentucky, who would hire and support people in their employment there? No. So let me put that into context. 6 companies that we've worked with in the last 18 months at Codify in Cape Girardeau have raised $8.5 million in capital, only a small amount of which they raised locally. Frankly, it's not because there aren't local individuals who would invest in those companies. It's that it's taken us a little while to start to formalize sort of investor networks and how we can help bring those opportunities to local individuals. There's plenty of local investment capital. There's interest. There may not be quite as much education yet, but that's coming around. And so there absolutely are great opportunities. Last thing I'll say about this, Michael, is that we often tell companies when we're recruiting them to Paducah or to Cape Girardeau or another community we're working in, one of the great opportunities is to be a big fish in a small pond. If you go to one of the primary entrepreneurial ecosystems, whether that's Louisville, Cincinnati, St. Louis, Nashville, in our neck of the woods, you're one of hundreds of companies that are trying to get people's attention, trying to tap into the resources that are available, trying to acquire talent. Obviously, it's not the same opportunity in rural communities. So we're finding people, founders of these companies, excited to escape the distraction, the cost of larger cities. This is not me getting into a anti-metro large city rant. I've lived in Boston. I love cities, but when you're trying to build a company, mostly what you need is focus and help. And the help comes in ways that are way beyond just capital. We do a lot of work, and the companies that are starting and moving into Paducah will be the beneficiary of this to actually just work on behalf of these companies. We roll up our sleeves and help them. It's not easy to start these companies. And so capital can come from anywhere. Increasingly, it'll come locally. The rest of it's just about building the business, figuring out how to make money and acquiring the talent you need.
Absolutely. And with that, we'll stop. There's so much more that Dr. Stapleton could share. He alluded to an important date coming up later this fall when a co-working space, 8,000 square foot co-working space, will be available in the Coke plant, what has previously been warehouse space. We're excited about that. I think that's going to be an opportunity to allow some folks that are tired of remote working, want to see some other people every now and then to get together. And it also will allow us to have a focused space to work with those startups, as Dr. Stapleton mentioned. And there's so much more. And I would encourage you, take a look at that video. I shared it in the chat. Take a look at our Facebook page and take a look at Sprocket. and what's going on. There are ways for everybody on this or at this conference to be able to plug in and get involved. If you want to know more and other ways to get involved, let me know, because I certainly am excited and really excited about what the next few years have in store with Codify and Sprocket's partnership. Thank you, Dr. Stapleton, for your time.
Thanks, Mike.
One of the things that he referenced in his presentation was blockchain, and blockchain is an important piece that is growing in importance. It's honestly something that for many folks, it's hard to understand. It's new, it's different. What is it? Why are we talking about this? Well, it's going to have a fundamental impact on our businesses, on our organizations, and even our currency. It's already having a significant impact there. So one of those software-based opportunities that we have in Kentucky is blockchain technologies. It is growing that space. And we are also blessed to have John Waltz, who is in the middle of all of that in Silicon Valley. He's from Paducah. I'm not going to go through a lot of his background because that's it's going to be part of his presentation, but he's from Paducah, went to UK, moved out to San Francisco, has been part of some startups, and really wanting to give back to our region and get more folks involved in blockchain, help start businesses in blockchain. And so I thought it was important to hear from John on what is blockchain technology and what's going on in our region and how can we get involved in that as well. So I'm going to turn it over to John. And as I do that, I want to share with everybody who is watching, if you have questions, put them in the chat. We can answer those questions as we go. We'll have time, even though we're running a couple minutes behind, we'll have plenty of time to answer questions at the end. And if we can't get your question answered today, well, you actually see the website to learn more, bluegrassblockchain.org, but we'll get your question answered. But it's really important to make sure that we get all those questions in so that we can answer the questions that are on your mind, either as we go or at the end of the presentation. John, thank you for connecting in with us today. Thank you for joining us, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks Murray State and everyone else who has contributed to host us here today. As Michael said, my name is John, and I'm going to attempt an introduction to blockchain at a high level without getting too technical or using too many buzzwords, and hopefully we can kind of all come away with a bit of a deeper understanding. And then I'm going to get a little bit into some of the ongoing efforts that we're doing in the region to bring some of those opportunities locally. So before I start, I'll just share a little bit about myself. As Michael said, I grew up in Kentucky, and around the time I was graduating from UK, Bitcoin was just coming out. And I've always been kind of fascinated with cryptography and software and kind of using that to change the world. So Bitcoin was a natural kind of fit for me. And although I was skeptical for about the first year of various things about the project, but I ended up moving out to the Bay Area because at the time that was pretty much the only place in the States that you could talk to someone in person about blockchain. And so over the last 10 years, I've had the opportunity to contribute to a variety of projects in the space. Everything from just submitting a little bit of code to doing security audits, vulnerability disclosures, advisory on architecture, and there's pretty much nothing that I haven't done in the space. In 2017, I co-founded a company called Secureware, and we provided blockchain security solutions throughout the ecosystem. And we noticed that the kind of existing established security firms didn't quite have the competency needed that the projects were requiring, the level of security that you need when you launch a $100 million blockchain, and the only thing that's securing your money is a few thousand lines of spaghetti code. So through that experience, we actually saw kind of a unique opportunity in the space where there's tons of great projects. All the projects were kind of oversubscribed with investors, and none of them could get really great security work. So we kind of used that opportunity and kind of used our security advisory side to do a little bit of diligence on the project. And then as we would move forward, that kind of allowed us early into projects that normally were very oversubscribed. So today, these days, I'm doing this work here in Kentucky and trying to translate some of the experience and network and opportunity and things that I've learned over my time in the space. And it really seems like an interesting kind of growth hack opportunity to kind of put the pieces in play and then let some things grow from there. And then I still stay pretty active with various projects in the space, advising, investing, and just generally giving feedback on projects that I think are interesting. So before I go too much into blockchain itself, I'll share just a little bit of history. Blockchain did not start with Bitcoin, although that was probably where the term blockchain originated. This notion of a digital currency and kind of the features of Bitcoin have been discussed in papers and research and mailing lists for decades before that. And so I have here some of the kind of early attempts at kind of putting together something that resembles Bitcoin. They all kind of had various flaws in one way or the other, but each of them kind of produced critical components that were eventually combined together to create Bitcoin. And so this context is really just to say that the idea of Bitcoin and kind of the primitives that it was built on didn't just appear overnight. They were kind of long-standing research and debate topics. So after that, Bitcoin is released, and that kind of let the cat out of the bag. And there were a ton of new blockchains that tried to start up, and this is Bitcoin but different. None of them got a lot of traction, maybe with the exception of Litecoin. The industry was still very immature, and at that time, Bitcoin was really just mostly seen as kind of a toy or a pet project. Then kind of the next era, 2013 to 2016, this was a time when Bitcoin was starting to mature, but it was really struggling for mainstream legitimacy. There were, people were saying that, criminals are using this and it has no legitimate use cases. And as a result, a lot of kind of like institutional organizations were pretty wary of touching it or being involved with it. And so at the time, most of those businesses were kind of like risk takers who were not the best at kind of running a real business. And so things were not very consistent in that time period. Then from 2017 to 2018, that was kind of the ICO boom or initial coin offering. And basically that was just a way of raising capital for these projects that kind of like sidestepped the traditional venture capital route. So instead of having to go to Silicon Valley and taking the meetings with all the big groups, all you do is you post a website and say, here's your token sale and your Bitcoin address, and send me money. And it was a really interesting time. A lot of scams, some legitimate projects, definitely way more scams than legitimate products, but it showed a lot of capital came in, and it really kind of reinforced that the technology in the market is here to stay. And that gave a lot of institutions and individuals a lot of confidence in the industry, and that this technology is real and has a lot of applications and isn't going to go away. It's kind of like the early .com, mostly hype-based, but people were trying to get their investments in early. And then kind of the next period, from 2019 until today or so, most of the talk is around DeFi or decentralized finance. And that's basically taking traditional centralized finance tools and just kind of retooling them and releasing them on a blockchain. And generally, they're more efficient and don't have kind of the traditional trappings and red tape of legacy markets. And so as a result, the returns can get higher. They can kind of reach new market segments that are historically underbanked, things like microloans. And then also, I haven't mentioned, I don't have it mentioned on the slide, but kind of the competition for smart contract platforms is getting quite large. You have Ethereum was kind of the incumbent, but you have lots of other rapidly growing projects, Polkadot, Solana, Algorand, Cardano. Everyone's trying to kind of vie for capturing that platform where kind of the majority of the public smart contract operations are going to happen. And you'll see that play out probably indefinitely. I think due to the nature of the technology and how fast it changes and how little we really know, I think it's really hard to make a claim about 10 years down the road about any current smart contract platform. And so next, I'll just kind of highlight the impact of blockchain. It's actually much quicker to have a discussion about areas that blockchain will not impact as opposed to where it will. So I just kind of have a obnoxiously long list here. And I can give kind of a concrete example from my secureware days. The World Bank has this problem where when they give money to a country, a lot of corruption, and basically by the time it gets to its intended target, most of the money is gone or it's not accountable. And so, that's just one use case right there of using blockchain technology in that kind of setting to ensure that the funds go where they're supposed to go and kind of reduce corruption in those scenarios. And then, of course, for us, it's kind of slower. We're very overbanked here. And so a lot of these impacts will not quite trickle up to us as early, but right now in kind of the more underserved markets, it's happening quicker. El Salvador recently declared Bitcoin as a national currency. And that, the impact that would have there versus here is quite different. So I think, though, as the technology matures and becomes more efficient and secure, I think it will start to bubble up more to us, and there will start being more viable options from, Robinhood will start getting competition from a truly decentralized exchange protocol, but it's just going to take time for the technology to mature to get there. And so what this means high level is that there's trillions of dollars up for grab in pretty much any imaginable vertical. And this can be done with really small teams. And so it's not quite like the traditional markets where you kind of need all the boxes ticked and in place to really capture value. You can start something really small and make progress really quickly. And a lot of that's due to improved market efficiency. And then for a lot of people, kind of the meaningful takeaway here is the end result is kind of greater freedom and empowerment for individuals, and kind of the ability for them to take their fate into their own hands and not be as reliant on benevolent third parties. So next, I'll just kind of go over what I would claim as kind of the core fundamental tenets that you would need to put together a blockchain. And the first is this notion of decentralization. And decentralization is not a binary thing. It's there's a spectrum, and things can be more decentralized or less decentralized. But generally, the idea is to address trust. And the idea is the more decentralized something is, the less you have to trust any single party. And so just as an example, like with your bank account, right? You trust your bank institution and the FDIC, and they say, we promise that your money is good up to a certain amount that you can get it out. The trust model is different in blockchain. You're actually trusting cryptography or math. And so it's a trade-off, right? Because that's a lot easier to kind of verify and audit, but not everyone can go through that verification process. And so for some cases, it still makes sense to trust an institution. And so the goal is to make the cryptography and kind of the pill that someone has to swallow easier and easier, to where it becomes a better trade-off than just trusting an institution. And you see that playing out today in centralized exchanges. For many users, it makes more sense to trust them to keep their money safe, because they're more likely to lose it if they're using, if they're really trusting the cryptography, running their own wallet. And so that's, usability and user experience challenges that the blockchain industry needs to continue to address. So the next pillar is this notion of a distributed ledger. So if we want this kind of universal source of truth, and I don't want to have to trust you that you're telling me the truth, I would like to keep a copy of the ledger too, and be able to track the changes over time. And so the idea is that anyone can kind of participate get a copy of the ledger and verify its state all the way up until then. And so next, the way we verify the state of the ledger, because I might have a copy of the ledger that says something different than your copy, and we need to eventually arrive on a consensus. And so this notion of consensus is basically just a rule set that determines, how the final ledger is determined. And so there's a bunch of different strategies for this. Kind of the most popular ones are proof of work, proof of stake, delegated proof of stake, proof of authority. And there's no universally best consensus mechanism. They all have their use. It's like you have to use the right tool for the job. If you are launching video game NFTs, you don't really need a consensus mechanism that will withstand nation state attackers. You would be happy to have less security, but something much faster. If you're attempting to be a currency for a nation state, then you absolutely have to be resilient against other nation state actors. And I would claim that Bitcoin proof of work is the only thing that has really come close to that level. Proof of stake, which Ethereum is transitioning to, very much needs to be proven because it's really hard to assess from a proof or a mathematical standpoint because due to the nature of how consensus is arrived and proof of stake, it's sort of self-referential. And if you have questions about that, I'm happy to get into it toward the end. And of course, Bitcoin uses proof of work. So the next area is this notion of public key cryptography. And that's a really fundamental primitive that all these technologies use. And as I mentioned before, it kind of goes back to a trust in math. And so this notion of public key cryptography is how we show to the outside world that I'm the rightful owner of something. And so kind of a simplistic version of the way this works is you privately generate a secret that it's impossible for anyone else to know what that secret is. From that secret, using public key cryptography, you can end up with something called the public key. And so you can share that public key with anyone else, and they can say, okay, I'm going to send 10 Bitcoins to this public key. And so the only way that I can be sure that I'm the only one that can spend that money is due to public key cryptography because I generated the secret. And it's also equally important that it's impossible for anyone who knows my public key to derive the secret that I used to generate it from that public key. And that's actually an interesting area with post-quantum cryptography, and there's some things on the horizon there. But interestingly, with Bitcoin, you have your secret, you derive the public key, but then on chain, that public key is actually hashed through a one-way hash function. So a standard Bitcoin address is not vulnerable to those class of quantum attacks that I mentioned. And so just to kind of provide some context to this, if someone has a billion computers performing a billion guesses per second for a billion years, then they have a less than a 1 in a billion chance of guessing your Bitcoin private key. These kinds of numbers are really hard for us to kind of hold in our minds and really appreciate the context. And kind of another example is the Bitcoin address space of 2 to the 160 possible combinations and only 2 to the 63rd grains of sand on Earth. And it seems like those numbers are maybe a little close, but they're very much not close. So it's an interesting strength because when you want to talk about trusting math versus trusting some sort of central party, then this is the kind of math you want to trust. So putting it all together, a blockchain is really just a distributed ledger and ideally on some degree of decentralization that uses some consensus rule set to determine what the valid state is, and then public key cryptography to deal with ownership. And if you know of any examples of a blockchain that don't use these things, I would love to know of them. But more or less, everyone uses combinations of these things with other things. And maybe they just use a different flavor of public key cryptography or consensus mechanism. And so next, what I see globally is the trends to continue. Legacy markets, particularly in finance, are going to see it first, and they will start making less and less money as blockchain projects start making more and more money. And we'll see kind of new markets being created, kind of markets that weren't available with existing technology. I think the NFT market, even though it's still really new and quite scammy, to be frank, it does kind of have a long-term future of kind of this new metaverse is the word that's used, but and kind of as humans are more and more willing to ascribe value to digital items, we'll see kind of new markets being created there. And then locally, there's a lot of opportunities to participate in this. And so we've created this initiative, Bluegrass Blockchain, to kind of bring those opportunities and associated benefits to local rural communities, because they're very much underserved and they very much have a lot to offer to the global blockchain ecosystem. So next, we'll just get into that a little bit. As I mentioned before, this is totally community driven. I really just want to direct some of my resources and experience and network and things that I've seen work into a place that I'm fond of and can make a big impact. And so I think long-term we can create a reasonably competitive blockchain ecosystem that keeps talented people there. And you're not always competing with everyone in the world. We've done work with developers everywhere. Developers in India have different strengths and weaknesses and costs. Same with Ukraine. Same with China. And so I really think that rural America in particular has a great value proposition to offer, and the skill set to get to the point where you can offer value is relatively low compared to other markets. So next, I'll just kind of get into what I see as the things that need to come together to kind of create this successful ecosystem based on my experience over the years, seeing these things happen in Stanford, Berkeley, Denver, Singapore, Prague, Berlin. There's this notion of a local ecosystem, but it connects with the global ecosystem. And as I mentioned before, there's different strengths and weaknesses, but when you plug in, there's definitely capital and talent flow. So meetups are really kind of essential to this, as kind of we mentioned in the earlier talks about remote work, which a lot of this work is very much remote first. There is something that's missed out on by being in person, by not being behind the screen, and being able to have conversations and be challenged. And it's really important to cultivate that. In my experience, I've seen several projects come out of meetups. I see deals being made all the time in meetups, or at least the conversations that lead to deals being made. And then next, developer accelerators are, developer accelerators are really important, especially in more rural areas where, in Berkeley, like, you don't have to teach a lot of this stuff because people, based on their previous education and skill sets that they built up, I can just tell them go read a few things and then come back when you're done. But really, to properly serve our communities, we need strong developer accelerators that are teaching people with targeted skill sets that directly translate into adding value at a job. And then hackathons are another kind of critical area in that human touch of getting kind of new perspective and context for our local talent. Not everyone has the opportunity to fly to New York and pay $2,000 a ticket for some conference. We want to bring, or some hackathon, and we want to bring those back to Kentucky and to the region as a whole, so that people can get those opportunities without having to have thousands of dollars for travel and tickets and all that. And then, of course, startups need a lot of help, as Dr. Stapleton alluded to. And that's something that I think we can help a lot with from the blockchain perspective. I've been involved with more blockchain startups than I can count. And I think the total market cap of them all combined is something like $40 or $50 billion. So I've seen a lot of really great successful projects come out of 3 or 4 people talking about an idea at a hackathon. And then, of course, it's really critical getting the right investors. There's so many funds that going to these blockchain conferences, you'll meet more investors than anyone else. Again, as James was saying, it's not just about getting money. Getting the money is the easy part. You really need to get an investor who knows the path and can kind of help guide you along and kind of prevent you from making mistakes that they've seen so many other people make, and to open the door for you at places that otherwise you wouldn't be able to get into, like with this blockchain. When you have these tokens, liquidity is essential. People have to be able to buy and sell your asset just like stock. So it's really important to have relationships to get on exchanges, centralized and decentralized, and making sure that you have liquidity that can support your project. And so we're building talent pipelines. We want the global blockchain industry needs developers. There are way more open developer roles than there are developers that can be filled. I can take 100 properly trained junior blockchain developers now and find them jobs. So it's really the opportunity is wide open for anyone in the region to apply themselves and get themselves to a point where they can plug in here. And then of course it's mutually beneficial for the kind of larger blockchain projects, because everyone I know that runs one or is in various roles, and it's always a shortage. Everyone's always trying to hire as many people as they can. So we're trying to fill the gap on both sides. And then of course, partnerships are critical to all of this. In the first year, we focused pretty much exclusively on local partnerships and finding local groups in the region, like Michael's and James's, and that have already done work, that have already laid some foundation, and see what we can do to help that first before coming in and trying to do a whole new thing. So the first phase is just kind of supporting what's going on already today, and adding value how we can. And then from there, next year, we're going to be, and this year, we're looking at more kind of global blockchain partners like maybe Tendermint or the Cosmos team, Polkadot, and some of these platform ecosystems, and get some of their material into our curriculum. So next, I'll just mention a little bit about some of the things we've been doing. We have been able to acquire 11 great partners throughout Western Kentucky, Lexington, Louisville, and Cincinnati. And every single one has been amazingly receptive. And it's been really heartening to see so many people that are in organizations that are motivated to be involved with this stuff. It can definitely be an uphill battle, but it's absolutely helpful to have people on board early. We just finished our first developer accelerator last month. And we had some great victories. And someone please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think everyone who went through that, their goal was having a job coming out of the program, had a job offer. We saw a lot of interesting, innovative capstone projects, and the progress that a lot of the students have made was great. There are of course challenges. I think, and James' talk kind of alluded to this a bit, but part of it is cultural, and really believing that you can do something, and that's not just an idea of, oh, I believe in myself. You have to see out in the world the logical steps to take to do that, and so that's one of the things that we're trying to do, is provide those concrete markers that people can see of, oh, I can learn this and I engage in this way, and then I have these kinds of job offers. And seeing peers do it, and seeing more and more success over time will help people kind of hopefully get over that kind of hurdle of thinking, oh, I have to have a college degree to participate, or I have to be some sort of computer science genius or cryptographer. That's absolutely not the case. And then, of course, we've been doing meetups regularly throughout the state. We found the existing blockchain meetup groups, and supporting them and helping them with content and resources in any way that they need. And then we've also been kind of doing our own series that rotates throughout the region quarterly. The next one is actually coming up at the end of this month in Lexington. If anyone's interested, go to bluegrassblockchain.org and scroll down a bit for our meetup page. So next, I just have a few of our partners listed here. I just want to, again, give a shout out and thanks to all of them. You know, if any between Western Kentucky and Cincinnati, if you're looking for a great co-working space or some collaborative partners to kind of help guide you on your entrepreneurial journey or your technology learning journey, then all of these are great resources here on the screen. So next, we're going to continue our kind of local expansion. I would love to get into and collaborate more with Codify and kind of bring our resources there to Missouri. So hopefully something good can come out of that. And then, as I mentioned before, we're going to be bringing in more kind of traditional global blockchain partners that you know, can help us out with building out our curriculum, and ultimately they're going to be a lot of the job pipeline on the other end. I would love to you know, support you know, new startups and creating jobs that way, but ultimately these organizations have you know, way more roles than they can hire for, and they're aggressively hiring. So we want to get them in as soon as we can, because I think it'll probably be a few years until so we have kind of that local ecosystem where there's kind of more local blockchain jobs available. And then we want to do a large hackathon next year, and that takes a lot of things coming together. And one of the reasons that we didn't do it this year is because I wanted to do more developer accelerators and get people kind of more prepared so that locals would be more competitive at these hackathons. I didn't want people to be too intimidated to come in, and then people who, you know, came in from out of town win all the money and then go back. And I would like, my hope is that our kind of local developers and participants can be more engaged by working with us between now and then, and feeling really strong and prepared coming into those hackathons when we do them. And then, you know, figuring out our organization and decentralizing myself. You know, I'm only one person, and you know, resources are not a problem for us. It's kind of more just human hours and engagement and time. So hopefully, you know, if you're interested in collaborating with us, or you know, you have any ideas there, we're absolutely all ears. And so I'll just mention next that you know, there are a lot of ways to kind of get involved and learn more. I always say self-study is the best way, and you know, there's no shortcuts there. It's just time reading. And I can't even tell you, go to this website and read all their stuff and you'll be good. It's a very diverse industry. If you have to start somewhere, I would say start with the Bitcoin and Ethereum white papers and go out from there. But not everyone learns in the same way. Some people, that wall of text is just overload and they need the YouTube videos. And there are some great resources out there, but unfortunately I can't recommend any. So that's just kind of part of your self-study discovery, is finding some good resources. And you know, I'm always here if you're kind of lost. Just reach out and I can kind of help point you in the right direction. And then group learning is another kind of really important aspect of the development of a developer and an entrepreneur. And the meetups and hackathons and all the programs that we're putting on are great ways to get that opportunity. And then of course our partners are also doing other things that, even if they're not strictly blockchain related, it's still good to kind of get face to face and do those things in person. And of course, on our website, you can sign up for our newsletter and we'll let you know as new things are going on. And then I always say the best way to really get involved is to actually you know, create what you want. And maybe that's something as simple as changing the color on a menu because it was blinding you on your screen, or updating some documentation for a project or anything like that. But just going through the process of making a contribution. You know, this is all open source, and it's a very welcoming ecosystem, and it's also a great way to get a job offer. So kind of getting your hands dirty early and often, even if it's not a breakthrough contribution or anything, is absolutely helpful. So with that, we can move on to questions, and feel free to launch any blockchain related questions at me now.
Well, let me first say thank you, that was really informative. I feel like I have heard a similar presentation from you before because I have, yet I still learned more about blockchain from you this time that I didn't either pick up on or hear last time. So I appreciate your willingness to do this today. One of the questions that I see has to do with consolidation. Do you think that there is going to be more consolidation in crypto mining or crypto coming? Stellar as a go-to for remittance, Bitcoin as a hold of value, or just consolidation into Bitcoin or Ethereum? How do you see that playing out coming in the coming years?
Well, a lot of the industry has this kind of tribalistic tendency where we like to say, oh yes, my project and platform is everything in the future is going to run on it. I think the reality is a little more complex, although I don't think it's going to be the reality of you having 100 different coins in your wallet. I think it'll be kind of, at that point, abstracted away from the end user for the most part. And a lot of the kind of platformy, blockchainy things that happen are going to kind of happen under the hood without a lot of user awareness. So, you'll be sending money, but depending on what company you're using or what country you're in, the protocols and the things that are happening under the hood will just kind of happen without you realizing, oh, I'm using Stellar or Ethereum or anything like that. From a development perspective, that does happen a bit where like Ethereum has a lot of critical momentum. And so as a result, a lot of the new projects are being built on that. But to date, those platforms are so immature. No one has truly figured out how to scale them in a way that the other kind of decentralization and security trade-offs have been acceptable. So right now, there's no blockchain that can handle all that load and everything moving onto it. The technology just isn't developed yet. And it's such a complicated problem that those kind of solutions might be decades out. So I think for now, we'll see kind of multiple competing platforms and ecosystems. Of course, the layer 2 stuff does help with that scalability. But again, the technology is just so immature when you're talking about storing billions of dollars and having billions or trillions of dollars in value secured by it.
So in Kentucky, I know every state's a little bit different, but in Kentucky, what assets do we have, or what barriers or limitations do we have that are either going to help accelerate blockchain or prevent blockchain from reaching the heights that it could?
So I've actually been pretty impressed with everything that has gone on so far in Kentucky. Just from the regulatory perspective, it seems like people are interested and willing to be more proactive than most. So I think that's an asset for Kentucky, is kind of the regulatory capacity for making smart decisions around the technology and using that as a way to kind of create environments that are conducive for businesses growing. So I think that's an amazing strength. From the workforce side, the time zone is similar, which is great. The cost is lower than the coast, which is great. And as far as like the capability, I think that people are just as capable. It's a matter of access to resources for getting to that point of education. And I'll even go further that a lot of the people that I've worked with in those more rural settings are very hardworking, industrious people. And you hire a developer out of San Francisco, they're going to work half the hours that you ask them to. They're going to be flaky. And so I think that's just a huge asset to the region right there, that we can say to projects, your workforce will be dependable. You can rely on your team to show up when they say they're going to show up and deliver on the project.
That's good to hear. Well, let me finish by saying thank you for your time today. While I know you're from the area, there are certainly hundreds and perhaps thousands of things that you could be doing rather than giving back and investing in our region and in our state. So thank you for your willingness to do that. And even specifically with Murray, I know that we had one student that participated in the accelerator over the summer. I think that you're coming to campus later in the fall. to share with one of our student groups regarding blockchain and the opportunity. So I appreciate what you're doing, what you're going to continue to do. And, you know, I've said this a couple times today. I am certainly excited for the opportunity that blockchain has for our country, for our world, but specifically, I'm excited about what it could bring for Kentucky and our region.
Absolutely. I wouldn't be putting in the effort if I didn't think that the payoff would be there. So thank you again for having me and giving us some space to kind of explore these concepts.
Well, thank you. And with that puts a wrap on IT Matters for this year. This has been for me, a very informative. If you watched each of these 4 presentations, you can't help but have taken a few things away that you could do to change your business, to improve your business, to make it more secure, or to think about and be excited about the opportunities for our region and the opportunities for our state. So I appreciate your time today. I appreciate your attention today. If you have questions, please feel free to continue to watch the videos. We're actually going to break up the 4 presentations and post those on our YouTube channel, so that if you want to share one talk in particular with somebody, you can share that link. We will continue to post additional presentations, additional speakers, additional videos to our YouTube channel on topics that are of relevance to you, to me, and to our region. So make sure you subscribe to that video or to that channel and to stay alert for upcoming videos. If you have ideas for topics for next year's IT Matters, hopefully next year we will be able to be in person. The hope is that we're going to be back to our normal schedule in person for IT Matters in the fall, and in person for Security Matters in the spring. But you know, the realities of the world will dictate what that looks like. So, but if there are specific ideas that you have for speakers, for discussion items that you want us to talk about, feel free to put those in the discussion, put them in the comments, send me an email, give me a call, catch me at an event and let me know, and we'll make sure that we share those topics with you in an upcoming conference or upcoming speaking opportunity. So with that, thank you very much for your attention today. There's a lot of you that stuck around for the full time, and we really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon. Have a good day. Thank you.